Hello everyone, and welcome to another amazing story. What if Izuku was in Konosuba? This amazing story was written by Magnus9284. Please support them. Don't forget to like, sub and leave a comment. Now let's dive in. The taste of freedom. The shopkeeper knew for a fact that the archdruid Izuku Midoriya was different. Different from other adventurers, from other druids, even from most humans. He carried a family name, but claimed no nobility title. He demonstrated the bearings of a vastly superior education, and yet behaved in a glaringly humble way. Izuku Midoriya was full of contradictions. Are you sure? Yunyun stuttered as she clung to the item in her hands. Can I really have this? The two crimson demons had been arguing over said item, a magic wand with the tip holding a heart-shaped magicite gem, for over 20 minutes now. Oddly enough, the argument was centered on the proper poses to make when brandishing it, and not even once touching the fact that it looked like something a little girl would use. Of course. Izuku promptly replied, flashing the cute smile he was known for, "You are part of the team, and you've been helpful. Why wouldn't you deserve a reward?" "I am part of the team?" Yunyun's eyes began to water upon finally hearing the words her heart desired for so long. "I'm part of the team." Megumin just sighed at the scene. Izuku meant well, and Yunyun wasn't an actual hindrance, but the fact remained unchanged that her boyfriend was weak to girls in need of being rescued, whether it be physically or emotionally. It wasn't a bad thing though, but such gallant disposition would surely cause a lot of problems along the way. Izuku was quick to catch the cute little sound, and even quicker to react to it. "And for you, I want..." Izuku dragged on in order to catch the attention of his girlfriend, finding success without trouble, a new set of clothes. Megumin blinked. "What's wrong with my clothes?" Megumin asked in honest confusion. She was certain that they were revealing enough to keep Izuku's attention. "I thought you liked them." The last bit was said in a lower tone with a shy attitude. She wondered if he wanted something more daring, like something a sorceress would use, like a battle bikini. "Of course I like you. I like you the way you are, the way you look." Izuku started, blushing all the way, "But you are growing, and your clothes aren't." In the background, let out a small chuckle. Megumin, with her tiny body, looked adorable in her normal outfit as the combination of a rather small skirt and enormous hat made her look all the more eye-catching. However, Izuku was right, and her body would soon grow to the point of her outfit scratching indecency. The skirt eventually becoming too short to protect her modesty, and her chest no doubt would find the cloth too restraining. Just looking at the other crimson demon was proof enough of how beautiful she would become one day, all thanks to a steady supply of food and shelter. If that's the case. Yunyun called to their attention, "Why don't we, go back to the village? How many times do I have to explain that he is my boyfriend?" Megumin instantly shifted into a defensive stance, practically shielding the now flustered archdruid with her tiny frame. "Stop trying to seduce him." As the flustered girl descended into a flurry of denials, Wiz continued to watch. Her heart and mind at war with each other, trying to find the right moment and the words required to ask her selfish request, and how to ask forgiveness for her disastrous blunder. "We are ready to make a purchase." Izuku's voice brought back the ditzy shopkeeper from her troubled thoughts. "We also want to commission some new clothes." Looking at the items before her, Wiz noticed that it was the girly wand and an assortment of accessories, all gifts for the girls that were fighting for his heart. The situation made her envious, especially because Izuku was sinfully kind and caring. "Wouldn't it be better if you commissioned this with a seamstress?" Wiz asked in honest confusion. "I can make these pieces of clothing if you really want, but it will be more expensive." The clothes in question were a couple of small chest pieces made of cloth with a small support made of thin metal placed below the breasts. She couldn't understand the function of the piece, but it wasn't armor. "I'd rather you be the one to create it." Izuku replied with a kind smile. "Then I want you to take credit for these clothes, and sell them to all the women you can." Izuku, being an only child, and growing without a father for most of his life, was forced to know and understand the function of bras. It was a truly embarrassing fact, but the women of this world really needed such a thing. He decided to allow Wiz to take credit for the invention rather than carry the stigma himself, of course. And of course, the very first models were aimed for Megumin, Chika, Darkness, Liza and Yunyun. "Why?" Wiz asked, baffled at the selfless offer. Izuku Midoriya was kind, caring and generous. Things that were hard to come by, especially together. It made her request all the harder to make. "Because we are friends." Izuku started before he seemed to grow hesitant for a moment. "Also, you seem to be depressed, and I want you to cheer up." Behind the archdruid, two crimson demons stood in awe. One shook her head in disbelief at the situation, the other just facepalmed, not in annoyance, but in an attempt to stifle a chuckle. No one, anywhere, would renounce the rights to an invention, no matter how silly or useless it may be. And Izuku was giving away something functional just to get a smile? If we are really friends. We started, knowing very well that if she didn't capitalize on the offering, she may never be able to come up with the courage to ask for what she really needed. Can I ask for something really selfish? Izuku knew that something was up, but he had no idea what. Wiz was easy to read, especially when something bothered her. Her ditzy attitude was her way of enjoying life in a carefree way, to tell her worries to go away. Seeing her so focused, and yet so absent. No cuddles or feathers. Chika interrupted the moment, using Liza as a shield. Only Master can have anything Chika-related. That spontaneous demand made Wiz chuckle. No, it's not that. Wiz replied, finally smiling, I need you to listen to an old tale, and then listen to my request. I promise that I'll reward you with something nice. For the next hour, Izuku and company were treated to the tales of the legendary Ice Witch. How she traveled the kingdom with her party while tackling impossible odds, and how they earned their status as powerful and courageous adventurers. Then came the tale of their downfall, how their egos got the better of them, or rather, their over-reliance on the fabled Ice Witch. In an attempt to boost their fame and glory, and the gold in their pockets, they had targeted Belida. The battle lasted for nearly 2 days, devolving into a duel between the mighty Delahan and the relentless Ice Witch. It had been, according to Wiz, a simple slip of her mind. Caught in the rhythm of their deadly dance, the Delahan had positioned himself in the perfect spot, shooting his deadly curse at the Ice Witch. He didn't expect to hit her, but the people behind her, people she had forgotten were there during her adrenaline-fueled combat trance. She evaded easily, and her party members had paid the price. Beldia, as expected, left the party to suffer for their shortcomings, warning them about the time limit before their final day, and how they were going to suffer, unless they could defeat him. It didn't even take 3 days for the Ice Witch to find a way to save her friends. Defeating Beldia alone was a no-go. She could stand against him on equal grounds, but without a powerful priest at hand, there would not be a killing blow. Instead, she sought another Devil King's general. The fearsome Duke of Hell, Vanir. They battled for an entire day, with the witch coming out on top at the end. With her victory, she demanded the Duke of Hell to help her in saving her friends. In the end, it meant shouldering the curse herself in their place. Vanir, of course, could do it, but he had warned her that her soul would not be able to shoulder such stress, meaning that she would die and the curse would be back on the original targets, barely buying a day or 2 more to live in agony. Seeing her despair, the Duke offered an alternative. By becoming something more resilient than a human, she could shoulder the curse without dying, thus saving her friends as long as she kept shouldering the curse. That day, the Ice Witch abandoned her humanity, and shouldered the curse of her party members. That day the Ice Witch disappeared, never to be seen again. Was the Ice Witch. Wiz finished her tale, sadness mixed with liberation in her features. I'm a lich now, and a general of the Devil King's army. I mostly just help maintain the barrier protecting his castle though. Taking a moment to see the faces of her audience, Wiz noticed that the looks she was being given were sympathetic. There was a surprising lack of rejection, no cries of outrage, or even incredulous looks. She could say they looked ready to help her. That's why. Wiz hesitated. She knew this had to be done, that there was no other way around the problem, the request. What I need you to. Wiz. Izuku interrupted the troubled shopkeeper, a kind and caring face illuminating the entire shop. Do you want to reincarnate? It had come out of nowhere. An offer so outlandish that it couldn't be true. Of course, an archdruid could learn reincarnation, but to use it on an undead. Then again, this was Izuku, the wonderful adventurer who couldn't care less about impossibilities. If he was offering, then it was a real possibility. Bonk. Seeing the young archdruid getting hit in the head by an angry petite crimson demon was another outlandish thing. Although it was clear that the hit wasn't aimed to hurt. Stop it. Megumin shouted, still holding her staff at the ready. What? Izuku asked in surprise, while holding his head in a defensive way. Why? You already collapsed today while reincarnating one ancient lich. Megumin stated, glaring at her boyfriend with worry. I won't have you collapse again. He did? Wiz was more than just surprised by such a declaration. On one hand, this reckless behavior couldn't be right. Exhausting one's mana to the point of collapse was taxing to the body, as exemplified by the underdeveloped Megumin, who not too long ago couldn't go a day without using explosion magic and collapsing. On the other hand, this revelation meant she had a way out of her deal with the Devil King. Reincarnation worked differently than resurrection, as the first spell threw the soul into its natural cycle of rebirth, meaning that all past sins and curses would be erased for a fresh start, while the second only returned the soul to the body, therefore lingering effects like curses would remain. Chika agrees with Megumin. Chika was quick to join in, taking the petite girl's side. Master needs to rest and recover. With speed and agility that the young archdruid simply couldn't follow, he found his staff snatched away from his hands by a pouting black harpy. He idly wondered if the petite avian girl didn't use some sort of illusion too. Master, rest? Liza added as she hugged Izuku from behind. It was a holding maneuver full of care and love, but Izuku could still say it felt as if he was being held by an industrial press. He could also tell that her sizable breasts hadn't shrunk in the slightest. Ah? Izuku's squeal was a rather cute mix of embarrassment and surprise. I get it. I get it. Even when he gave in, Liza refused to let him go, much to the increasing embarrassment of the party leader. Then Darkness and Ila entered the shop, getting a fantastic view of a now blushing Izuku. What's going on? Ila asked, failing to conceal her curiosity. Izuku was going to recklessly use his super spells again. Yunyun reported, barely able to emerge from her dazzled condition. I have to side with Megumin on this. Izuku needs to properly rest for a day or two before attempting that spell again. Ila was actually surprised about Izuku not struggling against his slave. Such a scene should be impossible due to slaves being bound by the brand, making them unable to disobey or go against their master. However, that curiosity was overridden by the declaration. What? Ila had no idea what they were talking about. What spell? Izuku, you need to rest before pulling any more stunts. Darkness interrupted, truly worried about the saint under her care. Miracles are tremendously taxing. You need to make sure you are always well rested before attempting any. But Izuku weakly tried to argue, but Liza continued to smother him with love and worry, making it hard for the young archdruid to focus on anything besides calming his hormonal impulses. Why did she have to be so beautiful and bountiful? It is fine. Was all but shouted, finally understanding that Izuku wanted to sacrifice his health for her. I'm not going anywhere. I can wait for as long as needed. That declaration brought everyone's attention back to her. Wiz didn't know how many would learn her secret in the meantime, but her life wasn't worth risking in exchange for her dear friend. If a party of heroes came in to slay her, she wouldn't mind as long as Izuku was safe. Would that be enough to keep Izuku still? Darkness asked all of a sudden. She loved Izuku's heavenly disposition, but he was reckless when it came to helping people. Can we trust him to not do anything until fully recovered? One look at Izuku was enough. It was obvious that he would sneak his way out to help someone in need. I can keep his staff while he rests. Wiz offered, knowing that such a powerful spell needed a focus to even be able to cast it. Let's go for that. Yunyun replied, immediately wincing as she realized she may have overstepped her rank in the party. Agreed. Chika agrees. Good plan. What are we agreeing on again? Ila couldn't help but ask. Understanding her new party members was becoming increasingly difficult. Don't I have the right to object? Izuku asked, annoyed at this development, but finding himself unable to struggle, or even order Liza to let him go. No. Liza's answer made it obvious that her desire for his well-being was overriding her ingrained obedience. As the party continued to browse her items, Wiz contemplated the path before her. Izuku had become her friend easily and quickly, but she didn't understand why. It wasn't infatuation, as the young druid had yet to properly ogle her, make an improper remark, or even try to feel her up during her many approaches. It wasn't greed, as she hadn't been asked, not even once, to lower her prices or to bring up the large collection of forbidden items she hoarded. In fact, most of the time the young druid only bought lesser magic items and trinkets to make his party members smile. Waving goodbye as the group left after purchasing some chameleon cloaks and a few silk cushions, Wiz continued to wonder how to proceed forward. If Izuku's reincarnation worked, the curse would be undone and she'd be free. Free to return to a life of adventuring? Maybe finally be able to find a proper romance? Looking down at her desk, the troubled Lich decided that pondering the future would do her no good. Instead, she focused on what she had in front of her right now. Izuku's staff was a thing of beauty. As primal as it looked, it had a perfect grip, balance, and perhaps the most beautiful resonance she had ever felt on a spell focus, but it hardly could be used as a weapon. At the side of the staff, there was the beak of a cockatrice. Without the cockatrice's stone gall, it had no petrification potential, but it still held the powerful paralyzing venom perpetually attached to the edge of the beak. Maybe I should upgrade his staff. Wiz muttered to herself as she held both items, then a cute smile adorned her features as she imagined how Izuku would react to the upgrade. It would be a nice thank you gift, even if only for the thought of helping me. Having no need to sleep or eat, the ditzy shopkeeper began to work on the upgrade while taking adequate breaks to touch the beautiful jet black feathers adorning the staff. The next day, deep into the forest, Quests were the daily source of income for adventurers. They came in a variety of shapes and grades of difficulty, ranging from the boring gathering duty to the ever-exciting monster subjugations. However, they all shared one thing in common. It was always impossible to determine the danger involved. Ruiyuan. Why? Why now? Why US? Not like this. A group of adventurers found themselves running for their lives. What started as a simple goblin extermination had turned into a massive fuck-up. Ruro. A large feline leapt at them from the bushes, missing one of the adventurers by the skin of their teeth. Why is there a rookie killer here? Dust and his party never imagined that a rookie killer, a feline best that resembled a black saber-tooth, would be lurking so close to the town of beginners. Then again, the beast was known for hiding away from strong adventurers, and lure low-level ones with weak prey. The lack of reports would be obvious due to the exceedingly low chance of surviving an encounter with one. Keith, Taylor called while trying his best to not fall behind due to the weight of his gear. Shoot it with your bow. Sure thing. Keith replied without stopping, or even looking back, after you stop it for 1 second. Dust's party was not the weakest, but it was not above novice rank either. Facing off against a rookie killer was suicidal at best. Gah! Lean yelped as she twisted her ankle, falling to the ground with a face that reflected her panic. She hadn't hit the ground and she could already feel the beast breathing down her neck. Dying by being torn to pieces by this monster was a horrible way to go, doubly so with the knowledge that her party didn't have enough money to pay for a proper resurrection spell. Lean! Dust screamed as he did the unthinkable. The pervert stopped dead in his tracks, and jumped to shield the girl with his body. They weren't an official couple yet. They just fooled around with the idea of being an item, to go on a date or two before committing. And yet, something inside the blonde forced him to act like a man, even if it was for the last seconds of his life. Bam! The loud sound was followed by the whining of an animal. Seizing the opportunity, Lean and Dust looked toward the rookie killer, and saw it rolling on the ground with a crossbow bolt sticking out of one of its legs. Protect the adventurers. The commanding voice held a cute tone, which made them recognize the owner well before his form came into view. Izuku the archdruid, somehow, had come to their rescue, again. It may be shameful, but they were truly grateful for this timely rescue. On it. Darkness jumped out of nowhere, lifting her thorny shield to protect the downed couple, thorny mace at the ready. What the heck is that? Keith couldn't help but ask as he looked at the one who managed to shoot the rookie killer. Ela the ranger, unintended slave of the archdruid, was holding an artifact that the archer had trouble calling a crossbow. In the delicate hands of the pink-haired girl, rested a contraption that looked more like an elongated box with trigger on one end, a tiny metal bow on the other, and a small barrel in the middle of the box. It was, of course, more complex than that. The cord of the bow ran inside the box through a slit. Below the tiny bow was a secondary handle with what appeared to be another trigger. On one side of the box, a third small handle could be seen. And at the top of the box, there was a spyglass attached. It looked too complex to be a crossbow, but it seemed to function like one. Reloading. Ela shouted. It was the normal thing to do, and it was to be expected that the girl would seek cover while struggling to pull the cord back and replace the bolt. The ranger began by relaxing the grip on the secondary handle, causing the arms of the bow to move back and release all tension from the cord. Then, with barely any effort, she pulled the third handle back, which moved the cord back into position, which was signaled by a rather discreet clicking sound. After that action was finished, she rotated the barrel below, which made more clicking sounds, revealing that another bolt was now set into a ready position thanks to its tip now being visible at the end of the box. Then she returned to applying pressure to the secondary handle, which forced the arms of the bow to move and tense again. Finally, she moved the artifact so she could see through the spyglass. Ready! Ela shouted after not even 10 seconds. Ruwa! Bam! As the beast made to roar in defiance, the ranger shot, scoring a hit right inside the mouth of the beast, piercing right through its brain. The party of adventurers looked on with incredulity. Kyuya's cheerleader had soloed the rookie killer, in just 2 shots. Are you all right? Izuku asked the group, his sincere worry soothing the hearts and nerves of the battered adventurers. Is anyone injured? The sheer impact of seeing someone so useless act like a badass hero was soon replaced with acceptance. It was Izuku's party, after all. I think I twisted my ankle. Lean replied, seemingly ignoring that Dust was still hugging her. If he was doing so out of worry, or out of fear, it was difficult to say. Let me help you, Izuku said as he went to place his hands onto the injured limb. Cure wounds, Izuku intoned. Emerald light shone upon the ankle, and almost instantly the pain was gone. Cure wounds was a basic healing spell. Common among all priests, and not uncommon in the hands of druids and other divine casters. The surprise that those watching felt, thus, came from the fact that it came out with a greater potency than what priests would use, and the light was far more intense than what was seen at the different temples. The fact that it wasn't white was also of note. Lean was hesitating to talk. The feat may be irrelevant, but it was still yet another oddity to crown the young archdruid with. Thank you. Lean had confessed to finding Izuku intimidating. Too much power, too many unique skills, so much more capable, that she couldn't even begin to imagine the hurdles of the girls following him. Just what kind of acts of devotion did they need to perform to gain his attention? Dust had never been so grateful in his life for small misunderstandings. Seeing the green-haired boy drunk once had been more than enough to understand that he was still human, and thus, relatable. Glad to hear it. Izuku finished, turning around to address his party members. Well, how was it? Their quest was about collecting healing herbs. It was simple, easy, and quick. Finding that the custom crossbow was ready just added the intention to find some moving targets for a field test. Izuku had no way to know how big of a deal this particular target was, or the fame that the pink-haired ranger would incur because of what she did. It's... Ila drawled on as she began to look at every part of her new experimental weapon. Heavy. But I can manage. Bianca. That was the name that Mr. Talanoff gave to his creation. A complex mechanism that used heavy-duty springs and gears filled the boxy casing of the crossbow, the hell-melted mithril making for a powerful alloy for most of the pieces, while the iron bark formed a not-so-heavy casing. The weapon was not easy to operate, as it required high coordination to quickly load the next shot, but it required far less strength when compared to other crossbows. When Talanoff asked for a new name for this type of weapon, Izuku blurted the name. Bow gun. What is that thing? Keith asked as he approached the ranger, who immediately hugged the bow gun while taking a step back. And where do I get one? Back at the guild hall? Izuku was kind of used to the intense staring every time he entered the guild. If it wasn't after saving someone, it was simply because he was surrounded by loving girls. Said girls, of course, were talented and strong, and not merely accessories to show off. Today, though, the intense staring was not directed at him. Can you please stop shielding your weapon like it's some sort of baby? Megumin asked to the nervous ranger. It's rather disturbing. Ila just reinforced her grip on Bianca. Apparently, Dust's party had begun to spread the news of the bow gun, and how powerful it had been against the rookie killer. There were actual eyes full of envy, animosity, and greed directed at the ranger right now. And she was well aware of them. She failed to notice the fear though. I can understand her. Darkness joined the banter as they walked to their table. Every day I get offers for the weapons Izuku made for me, but I'll never let go of them. There was a healthy amount of fear coming from the stares. The feat of killing a rookie killer in 2 shots was the equivalent of saying that she could kill 24 adventurers, just like how dangerous Darkness looked due to her being able to stand her ground against Beldia. The greed and envy were there, but so was the survival instinct telling them all that attempting anything would end in instant death. I think Megumin is jealous. Union's statement earned a loud gasp from the petite Crimson Demon. She doesn't have a custom item, while others do. The idea of teasing Megumin brought shivers to anyone who was aware of the existence of Big Bang. Seeing the small arch-wizard tremble in anger only made things scarier. Is that true? Izuku asked with a warm smile, earning a cute pout from his girlfriend. Should I make something special for you? Maybe a staff? That question earned a reaction from the explosive girl. You mean it? Megumin asked with sparkles in her eyes, earning a resolute nod from her boyfriend. Can it have that iron bark you grow? And a lock of your hair too? Unknown to Izuku, Megumin was asking for a tradition between lovers. It was believed that exchanging locks of hair would protect each other from ill intent. And for spellcasters, this meant a more potent focus. Well, Izuku playfully drawled for a second, if I can have a lock of your hair. Megumin nodded as they finally sat at their table. It didn't take long for her to snuggle up to Izuku. A lock of Master's hair. Chika muttered, imagining having a bracer or a ring, or even a pendant with such a treasure. I want only Master. Liza was much simpler on her thinking. Thud. And then she finally placed the other thing down. The thing that had nearly every adventurer drowning in awe and fear. It was the corpse of the rookie killer. To be honest, Liza would have preferred to tear it to pieces for easier transportation. But Izuku had requested to have it intact, as he had an idea for the materials. I'll see what I can do to please you all. Izuku replied with a well-natured chuckle, completely failing to notice the stares of those who misinterpreted his wording. But for now, we need to make a revision for Ila's debt. In her seat, said Ranger winced. Situations like hers required regular revisions to ensure that the debt was being paid in a proper manner. It also guaranteed that the one paying didn't try to steal or cheat their way around. For Ila, this was an obvious move, something that was long overdue, even if her time in this party had been rather short. She had been given a room at the inn, even if it was a small one. She had been having 3 meals a day, new clothes, and now, what amounted to a legendary weapon of her own. If the debt were to increase by another 20 million, she would still call it fair. While the ranger made a mental list of all the benefits she had enjoyed, and failing to suppress the need for a comparison with her time with Kuya, Luna had arrived at their table, with a few papers in hand. "Here is the balance," Luna stated as she placed the papers on the table. "Please check that there are no errors or discrepancies." Luna had a knowing smile adorning her face. It had all played out like Izuku wanted without a doubt. Taking her time to read through the 3 pages that corresponded to her, the ranger couldn't help the gasp that escaped her. It was impossible, there was no way the numbers were right. "Is this?" Ila couldn't help but read it again, unable to believe her eyes, for real. Tears were now rolling down her cheeks. What was in the papers was in no way correct. There was not a single person in this world that had the heart to do this. "That's right," Izuku said with a triumphant smile. "Congratulations on earning your freedom." The words of the young archdruid were followed by soft applause. It was a momentous occasion, but for the rest of the party members, this seemed like the most Izuku thing to happen. "How?" Ila weakly asked, wondering if she was just about to wake up to a crueler reality. "Why?" The tears were getting more numerous, so Izuku thought about explaining a little bit. "Well, you were already part of the party when Belida attacked, so, technically you were part of the party that defeated Beldia." Izuku's words made absolutely no sense. It was, after all, common sense to exclude the weaker members from rewards, right? "So, technically, a part of the reward is yours. It was a small portion due to your small participation." Darkness clarified, "Acting as bait is not enough for an equal share." The words of the nobleborn were a poor attempt to lessen the impact. The ranger didn't deserve any of that money. In fact, she was the reason why Izuku had to fight back then. "You've also been helping us with all the quests we were taking," Izuku continued, making even less sense, as her participation was that of target practice while adventuring. "Every little bit of help matters." Ila stared, crying. She didn't deserve this. Izuku, the man she hated at the beginning, was showing her kindness in a measure that was unthinkable. Instead of taking advantage of her like anyone else would have done, Izuku had helped her in every aspect he could. He polished her skills, letting her understand that everything she could do was helpful. He helped her regain her dignity, as giving her sensible clothes made her more respectable in the eyes of the guild and the other adventurers. He made her strong, as what she did today wouldn't be but an unreachable dream for her old self. And now? How is all that enough to pay my debt? Ila asked, her mind still finding it difficult to believe that the one to fight for her freedom was the guy who she thought had taken it away in the first place. "Here it says that I'm getting money for myself." She wasn't being kicked out. That much she understood. But to be given money when not too long ago she seemed to have endless debt? Wasn't this too much kindness for just a party member? Was he trying to also win her heart? "You've earned it," Izuku replied, being followed by the rest of the party nodding in agreement. "You also need to learn how to spend your money." Ila had been prone to always let others do the important stuff. When she was with Kuya, he would do the fighting and all the guild-related matters. Izuku had been given that last role too. "In fact, why don't you talk with Luna about your last kill?" Izuku added, getting a startled look from the ranger. "You need to learn how to negotiate for the parts, or decide if you want to keep them to commission an item for yourself. You could totally keep the pelt of the monster and commission a cloak." Yunyun suddenly interrupted, years of solitude dulling her social sense and timing skills. "It would be adorable to turn the head into a hood." While Megumin facepalmed, either because of the untimely interruption, or her odd fashion sense, Izuku limited himself to giving her some head pats. She may not have been a demi-human, but she purred all the same, much to Megumin's annoyance. "Come with me, Ila," Luna called as she extended a hand towards the overwhelmed ranger. "Let's talk business at the counter." As soon as the pair were out of hearing range, Izuku made a serious face. It was time to discuss something important. "Now that that is done, we need to get ready," Izuku proclaimed, getting resolute nods from his party members. "We'll be able to pick up the carriage in 3 days. Food and water are no problem, but..." Turning to look at the masochistic crusader, they found the blonde smiling. "Don't worry," Darkness replied without hesitation. "I'm sure my father will not object to the journey." While Izuku, Megumin and Yunyun could freely move around the world, Darkness had strong ties to the city. Traveling between cities was not an actual problem, but the journey Izuku intended required a degree of dedication that a nobleborn couldn't just give. She wasn't just bound to not return to her family anytime soon, she was also liable to never return at all. "Chika will forever follow Master," The harpy said in a low tone, one which Izuku was now comfortable with. I follow. Liza voiced her loyalty and determination, much to Izuku's happiness. We'll defeat the Devil King, together. Megumin was quick to strike a heroic pose, making Izuku smile while remembering the first time he met her. Yes, together. Yunyun posed by the petite girl's side, because we are a team. Don't you have to ask your father for permission? Megumin instantly broke character, now poking at the side of the now flustered girl. Did you even ask permission to be here to begin with? Megumin. Yunyun was now trying to shield her sides from Megumin's fingers. It doesn't work like that. Don't give the wrong idea to Izuku. Izuku couldn't help the laugh that escaped his lips. He loved these girls, his teammates. He couldn't help but reinforce the self-promise he made, to never allow his precious people to get hurt. The path to return home was about to finally begin, and he needed to make sure he was prepared to ensure not only victory, but a safe return for the people he loves. Omake, emergency meeting, for all about nothing. Inside the Adventurers Guild, in one of the private rooms, a group of people were holed up, trying desperately to find a solution for their current crisis. And that is the situation. Luna reported to the crystal ball sitting atop the table, those around her showing faces of utter distress. The dwarves couldn't be stalled, and I'm afraid the churches did a tremendous job at alienating him. Izuku Midoriya, the arch-druid who had completed more quests on his short time as an adventurer than many veterans in a lifetime of hard work. The same adventurer who defeated a general of the Devil King's army, bringing great fame to the city, and to this branch of the guild. The same cute boy that had been recognized by the king, and who was basically bullied by the churches of Eris and Aqua. And that wasn't even taking into account the attempted assassination by the Linden College upon his teammate. I understand. The elderly voice that came out of the crystal ball belonged to the Grandmaster of the guild. An elderly man who was diligent and hardworking, if a little bit of a pervert too. Losing him to the war, or worse still, to another city or kingdom, would be catastrophic. Is there anything he is weak to? Alcohol? Women? Men? There were groans of annoyance at the antics of the Grandmaster, although he had a bit of a point. A few promising adventurers had been tied to the town thanks to their proclivities, but Izuku was a special case. That is unlikely to work. Maria, another of the attendants, and a beautiful elf, spoke. He already has a sizable harem following him. 2 crimson demons, 2 demi-humans, and 2 nobles. Startled stares fell on the elven attendant, who sighed in exasperation. Lady Lalatina Darkness Dustiness Ford and Fio Ila Bella Flora. Maria elaborated, the daughter of the Duke, and the daughter of a lesser noble. There is literally nothing else we can throw at him to make him stay, at least in that regard. In his seat, one of the male attendants, the accountant, to be precise, began to take notes. The arch-druid seemed to have everything on his harem at first glance, but closer inspection revealed that he still lacked pieces for his collection. In the Crimson Demons he had a lowly and a younger sister type. In the slaves he had a brute and a pet. The nobles provided an older sister and a tsundra. He still lacked the Kaderi, the lewd bitch and the daughter types. Right. Luna was quick to shout, forcing the man's mind to return to the present. He requested land to own. Murmurs quickly arose. Owning land was reserved for nobility, which the young druid was not. Then again, through being recognized by the king, a case could be made about the boy being basically knighted. It was a stretch, of course. Nobles would complain, that was a given. But if the ruling lord could be convinced to give away one parcel of land, even a bad one, Izuku could be convinced to call this town his home. Excellent. The Grandmaster joined the discussion. Start sending letters to the Lord. I'll try to contact His Majesty to ensure cooperation. We only have a couple of days to convince Izuku to become a permanent resident. In his seat, the accountant couldn't help but see the glaring holes in the desperate plan. He could only think of 2 places that the local lord would be willing to sell, both too small for a druid to create a comfortable grove, and the lord wouldn't accept less than a king's ransom for them, and even then, he would make it clear that he'd be in a position to reclaim the lands on a whim. His idea was more promising. He just had to contact us to have him go to the Cream Cafe to request a special service for the young druid. That would confirm what kind of bait was needed to ensnare Izuku Midoriya for good. If everything fails. Maria spoke once more, earning some attention at her grim tone. I vote for Luna marrying him. That idea made Luna blush and sputter for hours. Then her blush deepened when she was asked why she didn't make a comeback about Maria being the one to marry the young boy. That lack of argument also gave more ideas to the perverted accountant. Purity. Atop the roofs of the city of Axel, quite close to the Adventurers Guild, one petite and feminine figure was flying. Small in stature, small in feminine assets, sporting a face that screamed innocence, she still exuded a remarkable lewd aura. Most males, especially hormonal teenagers, would no doubt approach her with impure intentions if they saw her. My first mission. The girl muttered in excitement, stars sparkling in her eyes at the prospect of success. I'll finally become a fully fledged succubus. If anyone tried to sexually assault her, it would be their downfall. Because she was a succubus. Succubi are terrifying demons not because they are strong or magically gifted, but because they know really well how to worm their way into the hearts of men. Capable of turning steadfast friends and brothers against each other with a wink and a blown kiss, capable of turning the most devout priest into a lustful beast with a single caress, they are amongst the most dangerous species of demons known to man. Here it is, the inn marked in the request. The little succubus muttered to herself while taking turns to look at the note in her hand and the building before her. Now, time to find the little archdruid. All churches have decreed that succubi are to be killed on sight, and should a coven is suspected to be found, the entire town razed to the ground in order to cleanse the land of their influence. But in Axel, such decree is ignored on purpose. There he is. The small girl couldn't hold her surprise, her target wasn't alone, oh my. He already has quite the entourage. And he sleeps with all of them at the same time. The Cream Café is an establishment hidden from the main road, but quite well known among adventurers and many normal workers. It was unique because it was fully operated by succubi, and it offered quite a unique service. They offered exceedingly pleasant dreams, vivid to a fault too, in exchange of the excess life essence of the client. Succubi feed on life essence, which they can either take all at once, resulting in the target becoming dead in life, or just tiny bits at a time, ensuring that one target can be milked for quite a long time. This could only be achieved by a lone succubus targeting half a dozen males. Axel, however, was known as a city full of perverts, full of pent-up adventurers in dire need of sexual relief. The leader of the coven found that in such a place with such a high demand of relief, regulating her coven to only take this excess could lead to a beneficial arrangement. Imagine her surprise when the man that found her coven didn't demand her life, but a custom-made dream. Now, to take notes. The small intruder was quick to take out a bit of parchment and a quill. He holds the lowly mage quite fiercely. The bird girl is covering both with her long wing. The lizard girl is being used as a pillow by the cute druid. Must have a soft underbelly. When the succubi matriarch proved to be capable of giving that first adventurer the lewd dream he requested, she found herself being showered with requests. When news of her capable hands reached the guild master of that time, she was allowed to request a reward in thanks for her fine job of allowing said guild master to taste all the attendance he lusted for, in his dreams, of course. That reward became the current building she and her coven were using now, which was finally recognized as a proper establishment. Unfortunately, not being a secret also meant that sometimes odd jobs would find their way into their hands. One of such odd jobs was to find the proclivities of an individual. Their existence being already illegal in the eyes of the churches, and the request meaning absolutely no harm to the target, the Cream Café found no reason to refuse. All right, Mr. Cute Archdruid, I'm going to enter your dream for a moment. With a little bit of focus, the little succubus began to use her mind to poke the essence of the sole male in the room. I promise I won't touch anything, I just want to see a little bit. Flashes of images began to take form. Giant towers of glass and steel. An academy the size of a city? Izuku Midoriya was being lauded as a hero, someone whose mere presence filled the hearts of all the good people with peace. Wait, is that it? The succubus was utterly confused. Dreams of being lauded as a hero were almost always followed by the need to have multiple mating partners, then they were always followed by the man being surrounded by ludicrous amounts of riches. Why was this boy living in a tiny blocky home? Seeing such a hard-working hero conforming to such a pitiable lifestyle was unheard of. At least most of the items looked of high quality, but still. Getting home after a day in the work. Being embraced by his lovely wife and family. Wait, there are 3 girls in the image. Now the succubus was getting desperate, her target had declared one wife, but the image showed 3 loving girls. Which one? Or is it the 3? Already desperate to get good information, the little succubus decided to push a little harder, goading the boy to either pick one, or jump into bed with the 3 and see which one he liked more. The attempt, made with true finesse, still produced a tiny frown on the face of the young archdruid, nearly imperceptible to almost anyone, almost. A pair of red eyes opened all of a sudden, darting instantly to the window. The violent killer intent leaked by the albino gator girl had been scorching. Even when she didn't caught the culprit with her sight. 2 buildings away, one petite succubus was shivering in true horror. The matriarch had trained each and every one of them to be able to sense danger and flee as fast as their wings could carry them. She had leaped out of the window's frame in a fraction of a second, then she darted through the shadows to get away from that. She was now calming her heart with steady breaths though. What she felt back then, it was like she had poked the most beloved treasure of a dragon king. There was no doubt in her mind that if she had been a fraction of a second late, if that thing had caught her in her line of sight, she would have been torn to pieces in the most brutal and savage way possible. How am I going to report this? The succubus muttered to herself in despair, knowing that she will be scolded if the information wasn't good enough, and yet, there was no way she would try a second time. Not with that dragon masquerading as a lizard girl. The next morning? Awakening at the first light of dawn was now the norm. Izuku felt like the sun beckoned him to raise better than any alarm clock of his old world. However, today something was different. What a weird dream. Izuku muttered to himself, shaking away any remaining thoughts on the matter. He had his usual fantasy dream of being a hero, saving the day, and coming home for well-earned cuddles. The last bit being a new addition since coming to this world. But then, at the end of it, he felt that something was amiss, like some external voice asking him which of his girls was meant to be his wife. Before being able to answer, his dream took a turn he really wasn't comfortable with. His girls were naked, and inviting him to. What dream? Megumin asked as she too began to get off the bed, startling her boyfriend. About being back on my homeworld. Izuku replied good-naturedly, while also omitting the wrong part. He couldn't get too elaborate though. I was in that dream, right? Megumin was quite ready to throw a tantrum. Izuku couldn't help but to chuckle at the sight. While he didn't know if he could take her back home, he knew he really wanted to present her to his mother. Just like the others. Maybe there was some truth to the weird part of his dream? Perhaps he was getting too morally relaxed after all? I said it was a dream, not a nightmare. Izuku replied, giving a loving head pat to his girlfriend, of course you were there, all of you. Izuku's words came out perhaps a little too lovingly, as Megumin was quite quick to turn to hide her blush. From her spot, Liza finally began to stir, her cold-blooded body already pre-warmed thanks to the warmth of her beloved master. So, Megumin managed to control herself within seconds, and was already reaching for her clothes to change. What was weird about it? Izuku froze. He didn't know how to answer. He had seen Chika and Liza naked, so remembering them would be excusable. However, Megumin was an entirely different thing. Not only he hadn't seen her naked, she was also an educated human, and will no doubt freak out at the mention of such a thing. You. Izuku's stammering didn't go unnoticed, much less his growing blush. Ugh. Chika's groan immediately dissipated the tension. Chika! Both Izuku and Megumin asked in alarm. Harpies were widely known for being clean freaks, always cleaning their plumage, taking baths whenever possible, and overall refusing to get filthy. Megumin had been surprised when Izuku explained this behavior as not being just vanity. It was hygiene. The only way for the oppressed harpies to grow healthy, or as healthy as it was allowed. Chika's belly is stuffy. Chika informed while she motioned to her lower belly, which was ever so slightly bigger than usual, with an egg. Izuku's mind short-circuited. He hadn't touched her. Well, not as in having sex, right? He had seen her naked, he did grope her tiny and lovable chest. And sleeps with her, every night? He didn't do anything to her while asleep, right? Suddenly, the memory of the dream came back full force. What if he did rape her in his sleep? With her slave mentality she wouldn't complain, of course, but that made it all the worst. Were the others in danger? Did he attack them already? Izuku tried to say something, anything. If he did something already, then the least he could do would be taking responsibility. Megumin quickly shot her tiny hand to cover the quivering mouth of her boyfriend. Don't. Megumin said with a low voice that sounded like a hiss, don't you dare say anything, not until I see that egg. NNNNNNGGGGHHHH. Chika's groan stopped any further discussion, she needed the attention, not angry shouting right now. Guildhall, 2 hours later. In a corner, one silver-haired thief brooded away as her thoughts kept haunting her. Not too long ago, everything she held dear and sacred was brought into doubt, the sanctity of her faith called out as a source of evil. This isn't fair. Chris, the thief, muttered while nursing her mug of ale. The antics of the cute and young archdruid had been upturning the world already, but did he really need to wreak havoc upon the faith of the people? Upon the name of the benevolent and loved goddess Eris? Her? The archpriest needs to repent, fix things before it is too late. Chris continued, ever so slightly betraying her true identity, speaking like Eris would do. She could truly understand, she could see why the archdruid would strike at her faith. Her followers did strike first, so retaliation was in order. But said retaliation was going to be much more devastating if not tempered with benevolence. From a religious point of view, druids were exceedingly dangerous. Capable of performing miracles without requesting more than the bare minimum, willing to lend their help when necessity arose, and known for respecting the laws and beliefs of others, they could easily entice most people into joining their communities, if they had them. Why isn't he influenced by his class? Chris questioned the air once more, unable to get drunk thanks to the insane amounts of stress she was going through. Druids were loners. Already rarely seen in civilized lands, and never taking companions barring a spouse or some pets, the commoners rarely had the chance of interacting with one, let alone take the time to get to know them and their ways. Nobles, too centered in their comfort, would never even strike conversation with one. Izuku Midoriya was the opposite, and that made him all the more dangerous. Kind, caring, charismatic, powerful, these traits already made heads turn his way, to start asking questions about him, his creed and his ideals. To make it worse, he was always seen in company of people. Rumors were already circulating. Maybe bonding with demi-humans while being a druid makes them stronger and more reliable? Maybe druids can buff party members just by being there? Can druids really live off the land so easily? Can a druid end a drought without a hefty donation? Maybe the crop fields would grow better if a druid blessed them instead of the goddesses? They don't understand. Chris wallowed as her heart ached. Reincarnated people have cheat powers. As the goddess heiress, she was aware of Izuku's situation. She knew he came from Japan, or at least one of the multiple versions of it. She had no idea what he asked for, but seeing Aqua in the mortal world meant only problems. Best case scenario, she was the gift, meaning that now gods weren't safe from the rules of soul transferring. Worst case scenario, the big boss finally snapped, and forced her to accompany Izuku to put an end to the long-lasting revolt of the Devil King. Both possibilities terrified her to no end. Fortunately, this one seemed to be a good hero. Much better than all the previous ones combined, already stronger than the still wandering otherworlders. Fine. I get it. Izuku's rather loud voice resounded in the hall as he and his party entered. This one is on me for forgetting something so important. Taking a good look at the young archdruid, it was easy to see that he was flustered. His companions showing varying degrees of amusement. Seriously, how could you forget it? Megumin asked with a rather large grin. She is important to you, and to me, and still you forgot that. That was the source of stress this morning. Chika had laid an egg, and in his moment of panic, Izuku had begun to sputter nonsense about taking responsibility. By the time he was finally able to listen to those around him, Darkness, Yunyun and Ila were already in the room, and were having a lot of trouble keeping their laughter to themselves. To be fair, I also forgot about it. Yunyun supplied, still having trouble hiding her grin. I don't usually deal with harpies. What Izuku forgot is that harpies, like most avian species, laid eggs even when not fertilized. It was information available in the guild's encyclopedia, information he had read several times in order to understand and take proper care of Chika. Said information included the well-known fact that harpy eggs varied in size depending if they were fertilized or not. Chika's egg, while double the size of a chicken egg, was still too small to be a proper baby. I didn't know anything about that. Ila joined too, unable to decide if to feel flustered or outraged. The harpy was getting more attention than her. Izuku groaned in exasperation. He was embarrassed, and recriminating himself for what happened early. He blamed that weird dream though, as such misunderstanding wouldn't have happened if he hadn't been confused about his feelings. Not that he didn't find Chika sexy, or Megumin desirable, or Liza. So, what do you intend to do with the egg? Darkness asked as she and the others sat at their usual table. She found the flustered boy cute, but the egg couldn't remain ignored. Harpy eggs fetch a good price as an alchemic ingredient. The guild would also buy it due to their value as monster lure. The church is a no-go though, they only buy fertilized eggs, although the empire. Darkness suddenly fell silent, eerily so, her face turning pale for some unknown reason, and her breath caught up on her throat. It was like she had seen a horrifying ghost, and Izuku didn't like the situation one bit. Not a go either, it's too far away for the egg to last. Ila tried to pick up where Darkness left off. At least she could provide this much information, which is a shame because they OW. Yunyun had quickly kicked the leg of the ranger, silencing her just before she could say something she shouldn't. Because what? Izuku asked, no longer confused. His party members were hiding something from him, that much was obvious. The Empire is well known for their slavery practices, so we don't want you to go there and do something rash. Megumin elaborated as elegantly as possible. They pay a lot for things like eggs because they use them in unsavory things. We know you want to do something about that, but you'll need to defeat the Devil King to have your voice heard. Izuku did look ready to march against the Empire and raze it to the ground. His party members didn't want to even imagine what their leader would do if he learns that in the Empire, harpy eggs are considered a delicacy among the nobles. They failed to suppress a shiver at imagining the widespread genocide. They better hear me after I'm done with the Devil King. Izuku muttered with a somber tone, then, he sighed and turned to look at the harpy in question. So, Chika, what do you want to do with your egg? The black harpy was startled by the question, and with good reason. Slaves couldn't own anything, their masters owned everything they had, everything they were, even their lives. Belzerd was kind to slaves, but even then, a slave had noting of their own. This wasn't her first egg, but the other two were taken away from her by her previous owner, never to be seen again. Well, it is master's egg, so. Chika really didn't know what to do or say, and her raspy whispers showed it. No, Chika. Izuku softly interrupted, it is your egg. Yours. You can keep it, or sell it to have money of your own, to spend in what you want. You can also destroy it so no one can have it, if you don't want anyone to touch it. Chika looked a bit troubled now. Being assisted by her master while laying it out had been endearing enough, but she had been allowed to carry it and toy with it for a while now. The idea of losing it was getting difficult to handle, especially after seeing her master cradling it like a real baby, even if only for a few seconds, until Megumin stated that it wasn't a live egg. No keep. Liza suddenly interrupted. She had been oddly silent and on edge the entire morning, although an outsider would never notice the change from her standard stoic self. Eggs, stolen. Everyone grimaced at the words of the always stoic Gator Girl. Commodities and highly sought ingredients will always catch the eyes of unscrupulous people who wanted easy cash. The egg of a harpy, being only valuable while fresh, would surely attract unwanted attention. Hello there. A certain silver-haired thief approached the party, immediately sending Izuku into high alert, although for different reasons. Long time no see. Hi Chris. Darkness replied good-naturedly, it hasn't been that long, but I admit we don't hang out as often as we used to. Izuku had completely forgotten that Darkness and this racist individual were actual friends, and shared the same faith. Watching her skin Chika with eyes that screamed anger and despise, was a sad reminder that this world was a horrible place. I don't remember her being a wild harpy. Chris couldn't help but voice her confusion. After all, last time she saw her, the harpy was missing her tail feathers and claw thumbs. Is that an egg? You can get good coin if it's fresh. Chris. Darkness' voice took a warning tone. Watching Izuku grow angry was a no-go in her book. Saints shouldn't allow negative emotions to guide them, after all. I'm not being confrontational. Chris defended, still failing to hide her disdain for the black harpy. I'm not nagging him about taking his slave to be trimmed at the church, am I? Megumin immediately went to comfort Izuku, giving him pats in the back. He was getting really angry, especially at hearing how such savage mutilation was given such a trivial name. Chris gave a tired sigh. Trying to be nice around a harpy was extremely hard, but she was willing to do so in order to fix things between the church and this chosen hero. Seeing her temples destroyed over one harpy was not worth it. In fact, maybe having one harpy serve the hero, and the church, could be good publicity, leading to less wild harpies in the skies. Look, I want to apologize, alright? Chris tried again, happy to find that her words seemed to work this time. Eris teaches us to be benevolent and to show compassion, to always side with justice. Teachings that some priests sometimes forget extend to those outside the religious order. Taking a moment to look at the faces still full of suspicion, Chris tried to act a little more bashful. It always worked on the good heroes. What I'm trying to say is that not everyone from the Eris Church is as greedy and condescending like the priests that attacked you before. Chris tried to explain, feeling victorious when she saw the Archdruid relax. I mean, you have been working alongside Darkness. And, while I'm not fond of harpies, I understand you were not in the wrong when you solved the crisis with Keel's dungeon. There was a moment of tense silence as the people at the table seemed to take in the words of the thief. Then Izuku let out a very heavy sigh. Fine, I understand. Darkness has proven that there are some reasonable people among your religion. Izuku conceded, but his face hardened along his voice, just as the thief was about to cheer on his change of heart. I still don't want anyone from your church to come close to my dear Chika or Liza. I don't trust any of you to not try anything against them. Liza? Chris asked in honest confusion. Eris only declared the harpies as her enemies. Why would anyone do anything against the lizard folk? Chris' confusion should have been understandable from her standpoint of view. During the Demi-Human War, it was the machinations of the harpies what brought the extinction of her beloved Avariel. That's why she made the extra effort of avenging them, leading to the absolute domination of the harpies in the actual era. Her teachings only reached the harpies, so other demi-humans? That hasn't stopped some priests from spreading the same treatment toward other races. Darkness explained, sounding really upset about the topic. I still remember a particularly energetic priestess trying to demonize the rabbit folk as well. My father was incredibly angry when he learned of how she cut the ears of a very young rabbit boy in front of me and other children. She wasn't punished, just sent to another city. Chris was taken aback. Such extremist practices shouldn't be linked to her faith, especially when the rabbit folk didn't join the war back then. Then there was the absurd amount of anger emanating from the archdruid. The mark of a true hero, to wage war against injustice in any shape or form. Now, if only she could make him understand that justice wasn't always nice. There. Megumin went for more back-rubbing, fighting a losing battle against her boyfriend's rage. I know it's hard to know that, but for now there is nothing we can do about it. Truth to be told, Megumin also found it hard to digest. Her clan was fond of demi-humans, so much that they religiously kept their founder's shrine to the mythical catfolk, one of the first species to go extinct during the demi-human war. Cutting the ears of a cute little rabbit boy? Yunyun was in tears. Rabbit folk were the favored type of her family, and while they would never buy a slave, they would go out of their way to help and nurse them, even their animal counterparts. Chris cleared her throat, wanting to bring the conversation back in track, and trying to dissipate the growing anger of the young archdruid. Well, just to let you know, I have nothing against demi-humans. Chris clearly stated, trying her very best to start a good relationship with the reincarnated hero before her, and while it is true that I don't trust harpies, Eris must have a very good reason for that. I'm willing to let your harpy alone. I may tell you once or twice to be wary of her, but nothing beyond that. Your warning is not appreciated nor wanted, thank you very much. Izuku replied with a stronger bite he believed he could muster, but feeling Chika's fear behind his back was too much for him. Is that all? Izuku's mind made a mental note though. He felt Chika cowering behind him, but she was standing at his side, showing fear, but standing firm? Well, I also promised to not try anything against the Gator Girl, not that I can do anything. Is there any weapon that can go through those scales? Chris added, thinking that it was unnecessary with how stupidly strong that particular slave was. Besides that, I just want to offer my services to your party. Consider it when you want to go dungeon delving, as having someone capable of lock-picking, trap disarming and scouting is always a good thing. With a light wave of her hand and a playful wink, Chris left the party to their own devices. Izuku waited until the thief was well outside of hearing range to talk again. Chika, you okay? Izuku asked while turning to look behind him, instead to the harpy beside him. For an instant, everyone except Liza looked confused at the action. That was scary. Chika's shaky voice came a second before her head popped out from behind Izuku, which led to the other Chika to fade away a second after. Chika thought she would lose her tail again. Izuku couldn't help but to give some head pats to the little harpy. It was impossible not to love her, even when her voice caused constant pain. Was that an illusion? Ila couldn't help but to ask, out of reflex, knowing very well that slaves couldn't learn magic because they couldn't get classes. Minor illusion, actually. Megumin replied without thinking, not that it mattered in the long run. I'm surprised she managed to use it that well though. Ila opened her mouth to question everything that was wrong. However, instead of talking, she reached for some fried toad to stuff her mouth. Izuku's party didn't make sense. In fact, the only reasonable constant is that no one in his party made sense. She would have lost her mind when fully understanding this if she hadn't become a part of this increasingly senseless anomaly. She took down a rookie killer in 2 shots. The black harpy could be using some enchanted gear for all she knew. Questioning anything would only make her look like an ungrateful bitch. Don't worry, Chika. Izuku tenderly reassured, giving some extra head pats. We won't allow anyone to hurt you, ever again. Chika was quick to recover her cheerful attitude, feeling truly blessed by having Izuku declaring such things. Master. Chika has decided what to do with the egg. Chika suddenly reported, making everyone wince because she failed to contain her voice to a whisper. I want Master to have it. That way Master can choose what to do with it. Master is wise. Are you sure? Izuku asked with worry, failing to notice how the 2 crimson demons of his team rolled their eyes at his loving antics. If I were to sell it, it would mean that someone else will use it instead. There was a moment where Chika's face showed some worry, but it was quickly replaced by an uneasy smile. Chika is sure. The black harpy returned to her well-contained whispery voice. Master will choose the right thing to do. Once that was said, Izuku made to grab the egg, which was no longer on the table. There was just a second of deadly silence. Then Darkness stood up in the most rigid stance everyone has ever seen her. Excuse me for a moment, I need to ask Chris something real quick. Darkness said through clenched teeth, before marching toward the thief. who was already talking with what appeared to be a fat and rich merchant. "Don't worry if you hear some screaming. I wasn't going to keep it." Chris' panic scream was heard through all the guild hall. "I was just getting it appraised to help him sell it." In their table, Izuku was seething. Megumin, now aided by Yun, was trying really hard to keep him still by patting his back while giving him words of assurance. It wasn't helping enough, as seeing Chika sobbing in silence was more than enough fuel to keep his anger raging like an inferno. "I guess I'm destroying that egg. Not even I can tolerate strangers handling it," Izuku replied after calming out a bit, and only because he could see darkness returning with the egg on her hands. "Next time something like this happens, I may end up upturning the entire place." Izuku's muttered threat didn't go unheard. Luna was quick to take note, and sent a very threatening warning to the silver-haired thief. And a notification of a mark on her adventurer's card. It made her blood boil to think that after everything the church had done against him, these idiots kept piling up reasons for him to leave. Couldn't they see that without his hard work, all the bonuses, incentives, and supply of good quality ingredients would be gone? Later that night, after completing the usual round of quests, curled up into their comfortable sleeping positions, Izuku, Megumin and Chika dozed off in peace. The day may not have been any heavier due to the quests taken, but their confrontation with Darkness Friend had been more taxing than they thought at first. The thief indeed apologized, although she still held her version of trying to help the party. She was also visibly dismayed when Izuku expressed his newfound distaste for her, her class, and her two-faced religion. Izuku would admit in private that he felt guilty for the harsh words given, but at the time, he was truly furious because that had made Chika cry. Slaughtering a large pack of running lizards had certainly helped with the anger too, even when he didn't kill them all. In fact, everyone was surprised when he went through the trouble of just culling their numbers, ensuring the quality of the next generation by not targeting the queen and those close to her. Izuku had to then take a few hours to explain why it was important to protect the balance of the ecosystem, and why eradicating whole species was always a bad idea. When the day was over, so their energy reserves were depleted, and that's why they were so quick to fall asleep. Except for Liza. The room was dark and absolutely silent. The soft snoring of the soul male and his girls was so insignificant even a mosquito would be detected. And Liza was perfectly aware of that. Last night something committed the unforgivable crime of disturbing her beloved master's sleep. She didn't know if such a thing would happen again, but she wasn't taking the risk. That's why she insisted Izuku used a pillow between his head and her belly, much to her absolute discomfort. Unknown to many, she didn't require a lot of sleep. 1 hour at night was enough, and taking short naps of a single minute while the party wasn't moving helped greatly to keep her full of energy. Energy rarely used thanks to needing little activity through the day. It's not like tearing a bugbear apart, and moving away a large boulder counted as exercise for her. Watching the night pass away while listening to her master's breath rhythm and steady heartbeat was bliss for her, and still she kept close attention to the surroundings. Well past midnight and only the wind outside seemed to try to disturb the blissful peace inside the room. Then something changed. "Really? You got scared shitless by one of the dumbest creatures to ever live?" One soft voice was barely heard, and only because Liza had an incredibly good hearing. "This is why you can't rank up." Suddenly, the sounds of flapping wings joined the background noise. It was like hearing two little bats. "Sis, I don't think we should do this." A second voice sounded, shy and meek. It was familiar. Wasn't the information enough? Two small things flapping their wings and gums outside the window. While annoying to her, her master was still undisturbed. No reason to move, yet. According to the matriarch, no. The first voice replied, "The client wants to know what to offer him to stay permanently in the city." The matriarch also wants him to stay. Apparently he is quite good at keeping the city safe, which means more free time for the local men to think of women and sex. "That's our food, you dunderhead." Liza could only understand that these two wanted to find out how to ask her beloved master to stay. In her opinion, this was stupid. First they should ask nicely, then offer to get rid of the idiots pushing him away. Then again, intelligence wasn't her strong point, and maybe asking him to stay was far more complicated. Still, nothing would excuse disturbing her master's sleep. "I see him, that's a cute harem." The most experienced voice continued, "And that's the brute? Okay, I get it, those are some intimidating muscles. I doubt she can do anything about magic though." Liza couldn't care less what they thought or said about her. The only important voices were her master's, and to a lesser degree, Megumin's. Chika was important as something to protect, but her opinion was not important. Magic began to seep into the room, slowly but steadily reaching for Izuku. Liza tensed, getting ready to strike, but kept still. It's not that she could tell it was magic, but she knew something changed inside the room, and yet her master remained undisturbed. By the flames of hell. The experienced voice exclaimed in barely contained surprise, "He's so pure, it's disgusting." Izuku remained undisturbed, but that insult against one of her master's virtues wasn't going to be forgotten, or ever forgiven. "There is nothing wrong with that," the shy voice retorted. "I don't think dreaming only of sex is necessary. That's because all the men you had were those seeking a pure girl to date and romance." The experienced voice shot back, "Seriously, get into an orgy already. Cute romance is to us like cereal and milk is for humans, you can't live off of that." The bickering died, but they remained there. Liza didn't relax, not even a bit. If her master was not disturbed, so be it, but if he did? Ugh. I can't stand this boring shit anymore. There was the experienced voice again, "Let's spice things just a bit. Let's push him just enough to see his perverted side and gather what we came here for." The shy voice whimpered in fear. And then, it finally happened. Izuku's cute face frowned, his peaceful slumber had been disturbed ever so slightly. Liza needed no further incentive. With speed, agility and flexibility that her form had no right to have, she disentangled from her privileged position, allowing Izuku's head to safely land thanks to the fluffy pillow, Megumin and Chika undisturbed due to their prized headrest being Izuku's chest. The succubi outside had no chance whatsoever to react. The distance between themselves and the enraged gator girl became non-existent in a mere heartbeat. The windows, resistant enough to just withstand an accidental hit, may as well have been non-existent when tested against the outstretching arms of the mighty dragon totem warrior. To be fair, even a thick brick wall wouldn't have been enough either. Crash! The extremely loud sound of a window being smashed with extreme prejudice was enough to awaken the other 3 occupants in the room. It also woke up everyone else in the inn. What? Izuku couldn't help the stutter. He was startled by the loud sound, and the repeat of the lewd dream. What happened? Megumin and Chika were just as startled. They were just in the middle of romantic dreams themselves. They had no need of succubi aid though. "Master. Awake?" Liza asked with an apologetic expression. Sorry." Hearing her cute apology had nearly no effect. After all, she was holding 2 winged girls with her clawed hands. Said claws wrapped around each girl's head. It was very clear she could crush their skulls like a gorilla would a ripe tomato anytime she so desired. "What's going on?" Darkness shouted as she rushed inside the room, still dressed on her nightgown while wielding both club and shield. "What happened?" Ila was right behind, already scanning the room with her bow gun, own nightgown doing no favors for her newfound bravery. "Why are there succubi here?" Yunyun screamed in disgust while pointing her cute wand toward Liza's prisoners. She was wearing a bunny onesie, she looked adorable on it, and if not for the current situation, Izuku would have asked her to get one for Megumin. Still being held by what could only be draconic claws of doom, the pair of succubi couldn't help but despair. They had been found, they were captured, and now, most likely, they will be tortured to death. If not by a religious group, by the matriarch herself for fucking up such an important job. Make a letter home, for all about nothing. Ila was sitting on a desk inside her room. Before her was a piece of parchment and a quill. Her current task was to write a letter home. It was not the first letter she writes, but this was going to be the first time she actually sends it. Letting out a sigh, she decided that this should be done, and there was no point on delaying things anymore. "Dear Dad and Mom. Since the day I left you to become an adventurer, a lot of things have happened. First, I fell in love like an idiot, becoming a follower to a young man who carried a relic weapon. It was just like you warned me, he called himself a hero, and for a time, I actually thought he was one. He was handsome, he had money, and he had power. And I got blinded by all of it, becoming incapable of seeing the glaring defects of this man. I thought he was dependable, because he was able to tackle all challenges without breaking a sweat. I thought he loved me, because he treated me well. I thought he was perfect, because I couldn't see any defects. I wish I understood sooner. Before letting him embrace me. Don't worry, I carry no burden for my foolishness. I also made sure to never let him know my noble status, not that I have, or ever had, any claim to our family name. I know I have no right to any inheritance, and knowing you never hated me is more than enough treasure to cherish my true name. Still, at the time, I thought I was set up for living a fairy tale of my own, getting the hero for myself. Even though he got another woman in the party, a woman he also treated well, which he also embraced behind my back. So, it happened as you warned me. He tossed me to the side when I was no longer needed, to pay for a massive debt he saddled himself with. Because he challenged someone far stronger than he would ever be. It was my fault too. I foolishly believed he would come back to rescue me after chaining me with his debt. Now I understand what he truly was. A spoiled brat with a relic weapon. The weapon carried him through all the challenges. So I was carried along. That path leads to complacency and stagnation. It also leads to a false sense of superiority, because he thought he couldn't lose, and that he was always in the right. That's why he fought, and lost, to a druid named Izuku Midoriya. Perhaps you heard of him by now, as the man who killed Beldia, the general of the Devil King's army. That's the man I serve now. I say serve. Like he owns me. But in reality he freed me of the massive debt, and now I follow him out of gratitude. He taught me how to fight, how to use my skills, how to deal with the guild. He's been teaching me a lot, and even commissioned for me a crazy weapon that is on par with a legendary bow. And the only thing he asked for in return is that I keep growing and learning. It is as Dad said. Mistakes makes us learn and mature. He said something similar to Kyuya though. He intends to fight against the Devil King himself. Unlike Kyuya, though, I actually believe he can do it. He is crazy strong, and is followed by crazy strong people. I don't know if I'll be able to keep up the pace, but at least I promise to make you proud with my own achievements. I love you, and miss you. Like I miss all my brothers and sisters. With love, your youngest daughter, Fio Ila Bella Flora. Taking a moment to look at her writing, Ila decided it was good enough. She could have mentioned how she killed a rookie killer herself, but that may have gained enough attention to be summoned back home, maybe even have the inheritance order shifted. She didn't have the heart to do that to her brothers. Besides, if she was going to have her own nobility title, she decided she wanted to earn it herself. Well, maybe earn it as part of Izuku's party, but with her own effort. Omake, reaping what you sow? Halfway to Alcanrisha, Aqua's party had to stop on a small town to restock provisions and make some extra money through quests. While Aqua's habit of spending a little too much money on alcohol was bad enough, Kyuya's inability to say no was way worse. Why can't this town have good wine? Aqua whined while nuzzling her bottle. It was the last one. Why can't this people understand that without good offerings there can be no good blessings? Clemia, the thief, was having trouble seeing this party succeeding. To be fair, she knew that Kyuya was partially responsible for this. It was the blonde idiot who spoiled this bratty archpriestess with high-quality wine. It was the swords master who insisted that his Lady Aqua deserved only the best of everything. That had burned through their pockets really fast. Well, through his pockets. She wasn't using her own money on some bitch's vices. The only reason she hadn't killed the bitch is because she had rejected all of Kyuya's advances. It was only a matter of time before Kyuya gets the hint and returns to her waiting arms. Hey, did you heard? Someone angered an ancient lich near Axel not too long ago. Clemia went stiff at the rumors. She clearly remembered that particular dungeon raid, and how it ended poorly before the archpriestess could properly purify the area. At least she got a bag full of coins. Yeah, I heard a powerful and benevolent archdruid put an end to the lich. At the mention of an archdruid, the thief quickly imagined the freckled cute boy that humiliated Kyuya back then. She still called foul play, but Kyuya didn't help with his reckless challenge in the first place. You mean the same archdruid that exterminated Beldia? Why is such a monster not in the front lines? Clemia froze. Were they talking about the same archdruid? Kyuya refused to march against Belida due to the difficulty of the task. His explanation of needing a higher level had been not without base. Belida had killed countless adventurers through his career, including wielders of legendary gear. And she was expected to believe that the cute boy that defeated Kyuya also defeated such a monster? Perhaps that's why Kyuya lost? Or maybe she just chose wrong. Maybe she should have taken the debt on her name to stay beside such a powerful individual. Defeating Belida was meant to be the first step into the main stage of the world of heroes for Kyuya, and that first step was now gone. Well, I'm sure he didn't solo that monster. I heard he is accompanied by 2 crimson demons, a mighty crusader, and a ranger that soloed a rookie killer. I can see such a group of monsters taking on Beldia. Clemia froze yet again. Did they just mention Ila? Soloing a rookie killer? How? A party full of monsters, a lizard girl crushing her sword with her bare teeth. She did make a mistake, didn't she? If she had taken the debt, would her skills have been boosted to such a degree she could solo a rookie killer? Her skills haven't gotten any better since she begun following Kyuya, and Ila's became top-notch in just weeks? What do you mean we got marks on our adventurer's cards? Kyuya's wail was more than enough of a signal for the thief. This party was no longer a good fit for her. As discreetly as she could, she unregistered her name from the party and used Lurk to abandon the guild. The mark will make things difficult for a time, but she wasn't a branded criminal. She was sure she could return to Axel with some wise investments and legwork. From there, she will have to find a way to convince the cute archdruid to take her in. Dealing with men was one of her skills anyway. Clemia. Kyuya called for aid, just to find a lone drunk on the table he chose. Clemia? Clemia. Kyuya quickly found out that having a powerful weapon meant nothing if you can't take quests to earn money. He also found that his beloved goddess wasn't fond of making sacrifices. Girl talk, for all about Noten. As usual, the party of the number one adventurer was having lunch at the dining area of the guild hall. Unlike most of the time, the young archdruid was nowhere to be seen. It had been a long day of exterminating packs of goblins, dire wolves, dire bears, and a couple of bugbears, all of them victims of Izuku's anger, an anger born due to the stupidity of a religious thief earlier that morning. I never thought he would be so angry. Ila spoke after taking a few bites of her food. For the ranger, many of the quirks of her party were still new to her, and difficult to understand at the best of times. Izuku's love for his party members as a group was a given, as his status and power meant that forming a harem was an obvious step. However, his overwhelming protectiveness of his slaves was shocking. Master's love is warm. Chika whispered, earning tiny winces from her companions, who were still getting accustomed to her voice. Chika is very happy to be loved so much. When Izuku left them all in the guild hall, he had ordered Liza and Chika to stay there too, giving them the duty of protecting Megumin while he sought a moment of peace for himself. In truth, he just wanted to pay a visit to Wiz in private, intending to put Chika's egg to good use and not having to deal with the idea of someone else mishandling such a precious item. While Chika had obeyed the order with a hesitant smile, Liza had immediately tensed, wanting to follow him to ensure his safety. In the end she couldn't disobey, but her body had remained tense from that moment onward, and the rest of the girls knew that the first to bother her would most likely not survive her first blow. So, Yunyun called to their attention, her social awkwardness shining like sun in the middle of the day. Who does he love more? The entirety of the group fell silent. It was no secret that Izuku and Megumin were an item, much less that they shared a room, but at the same time, he took his two slaves along during the night. The rumors flying around were nothing short of scandalous. I mean, he sleeps with the three of you. Yunyun continued, trying to have her very first girl talk moment, and he is very nice and caring to all of us too. For the Crimson Demon clan, a girls' talk session was no ordinary thing, nor a trivial moment of bonding. For them, it means traversing a dangerous minefield where a lie could be just as disastrous as the truth. It was a battlefield where private reputation and public image rested on the edge of annihilation. Well, don't look at me. Ila quickly answered, I'm the newest member and I have done very little to earn such affection. The ranger knew her place. She was the newcomer, and her entrance in this elite group had been the result of Izuku's pity on her miserable life. The archdruid had no reason to rescue her, to take her in when he could have easily just sent her to work her ass off at the market, no reason to dress her in proper adventurer's garments and gear, to teach her how to use her skills and build. Then why did he do all that for her? I mean, it is true that he freed me from the debt. Ila began to switch gears, her voice taking a tone that denoted doubt. He also rescued me from the pitfall the other guy had me in by making me a proper fighter. The more the pink-haired ranger dwelled on it, the more she began to resent her previous party leader. Kyuya said he loved her, but he only wanted her to cheer for him, to be there to make him feel better. Izuku hadn't said anything about love or desire, but he had made her strong and capable. He had turned her from a cheerleader into a well-respected adventurer. Kyuya had dressed her like a doll, something pretty to look at, someone pleasing to his sight. Izuku had dressed her in proper gear, giving her the tools to grow into her own self, and the freedom to become the strong woman she desired to be when she left home. Would that be love? Do you think he likes me? Ila shyly asked, her face slowly developing a full blush. I don't want to disrupt the order. I think, maybe. A saint's love does not translate to carnal desires. Darkness suddenly interrupted, her voice still sounded wise even after going through half of her beer mug. He loves us all, but he has no intention of getting between our legs. What was left unsaid by the blonde crusader was the fact that no one would refuse such advances from their party leader. Wait! Yunyun suddenly shouted, sparkles in her eyes sending a bad feeling down Megumin's spine. Does that mean it's alright to love him too? The conversation immediately ground to a halt. So far they hadn't done more than toy with the idea, fantasize with the concept. But now they began to consider it an option. Heroes and powerful adventurers always gravitated towards forming a harem, or a harem gravitated to their presence. For Yunyun it was the most obvious thing to do. She couldn't bear the idea of getting between her friend and the cute archdruid, but introducing him to the clan was important, and she really loved how he treated her like a dear friend. She was fine with becoming a concubine. Why would that be wrong? Chika innocently asked. Chika thinks everyone should love Master. For Ila it was more than worth considering the option. She thought that Kyuya loved her, but comparing that to what Izuku provided her, it was like a sad joke. Her party leader would no doubt earn a nobility title, and when that came, he would need a trusty aide to sort through the burden of being a noble, things that a druid would surely hate to tend to. Providing such aid in the form of a venerable second wife would be both a wonderful way to repay his kindness and the perfect opportunity to reach her goal. Marriage. Darkness muttered in a low voice, however, her single word hit the others like a battering ram. For Darkness the chance meant accomplishing several major fantasies. She would be immediately disgraced as a noble due to Izuku not being highborn, her name tarnished by the rest of the noble houses through bearing the children of someone who didn't even have an acknowledged social status, and yet, she would receive the perfect position to perpetually guard her saint. The very angels would treat her like an equal due to undertaking such responsibility, her very body becoming a symbol of purity by being the receptacle of a saint's lovely affections, her bloodline becoming holy by mixing it with the lineage of who would no doubt become the voice of the very world. You all better not get any weird ideas. Megumin finally warned her party members, he is mine, I'll be his wife. We already did it. Megumin just wanted to reaffirm her position. She really didn't want competition, and while it was true she would absolutely share Izuku with Chika and Liza, she knew that the demigirls had absolutely no intention of dethroning her. Seeing the looks of envy and outrage from the other girls meant that she had fucked up though. What? When? How was it? Megumin reeled back. It was obvious that exposing her little secret had backfired in the most horrible way. So this is where you are? A sudden male voice interrupted the storm that was about to be unleashed. You again? Darkness asked in a rather annoyed tone. My answer will not change, Yavin. I'm not handing over my shield, nor my club, to anyone. The young man that had interrupted the group was a lanky-looking guy with blonde hair in a bowl-cut style, and blue eyes that looked full of lust and greed. He was also surrounded by 3 female warriors clad in bikini armor. Ila had to fight a small episode of PTSD upon seeing the group. Not even for double the amount? The man asked, narrowing his eyes in obvious discomfort. Not even for your life and soul. Darkness replied without hesitation. Many had asked Darkness about her ironbark gear, and most of them had requested trades. The shield and club Izuku had made for her was classed as made from ironbark, however, they didn't act like gear made of the same material. Ironbark, when correctly handled, showed steel-like properties with only a fraction of the weight. It was a renowned material, but it wasn't as coveted as mithril, adamantite, or orichalcum. Izuku's gear, however, outclassed the most coveted material known in the kingdom. The ironbark grown by the cute archdruid was harder than adamantite, and resisted magic like a mithril orichalcum alloy, all without weighing more than standard ironbark. The thorns adorning both items weren't just for show either, making both items exceedingly dangerous. Beldia claiming them to be blessed by multiple gods just made things worse. Stubborn bitch. The blonde guy sneered, but otherwise didn't do much. The man bothering Darkness was the son of a noble, and as such, he always wanted to get his hands on powerful artifacts and gear to adorn his sexy followers. As the son of a noble, he was known to pull rank to get his way whenever possible, however, he was also aware of where his place was in the hierarchy. Which was worlds below Darkness. Being adventurers meant that he could get away with a lot of disgraceful behaviors, like throwing light insults, or bothering her with constant requests for a fair trade. But he would never be able to raise his hand against her. The son of a baron challenging the daughter of a duke would meant the immediate execution of not only his life, but that of his entire family. What about you, cutie witches? The guy turned his attention to the 2 crimson demons. Any epic legendary gear you can show me? Perhaps the well-developed one wants to join my elite party. The young noble asked the last question while eyeing Yunyun, or rather, her breasts. No. Yunyun panicked while shielding her chest. She may have been starving for attention, but the only eyes she could tolerate looking at her with lust belonged to her party leader, not some sleazy noble. Before the noble creep could say another word, or even try to make a move, Liza stepped between him and the crimson demons. Her face revealed no emotion whatsoever, but even someone as dense as the idiot son of a baron knew not to mess with a gator demi-human on guard duty. They were both simple-minded and slow, but absolutely deadly when engaged in combat. Master Yavin, how about that epic bow gun? One of the women following the noble asked while pointing at Ila. That's the original one, which means it would be better than any replica that damn dwarf can make. The observation helped the idiot noble to overcome his temporary fright. The animal had shielded the witches, not the other girls. You, commoner. The blonde idiot pointed toward the now panicking ranger, who just hugged her weapon like one would shield a baby. Hand over that epic weapon or what? Izuku's voice froze not only the invading group, but the entirety of the guild hall. The question rolled off the tongue of the druid without any of his usual kindness. The idiot couldn't find his voice. The archdruid, the The man that destroyed Kuya, killed Beldia, and vanquished an ancient lich was looking at him like he was nothing more than a worthless insect that had scared his lovers. "Leave," Izuku ordered. His bottled anger, product of having to deal with a zealot of a thief earlier that day, was bubbling up. The invading group ran away as fast as their legs could carry them. They would later change the facts to make it look like they had enough skill to escape from an angry god, not that Izuku cared about that. "Are you all right?" Izuku asked, his voice now full of the love his party members were accustomed to. "Did that guy try anything?" Before anything else could be said, all the girls, save Darkness and Liza, darted forward to hug their beloved leader. Not knowing what to say or what to do, Izuku attempted to hug everyone back, making use of his vines to further instill a sense of security on his beloved party members. Said hug also encompassed Liza and Darkness, much to their enjoyment. Omake, their first time? In the privacy of their inn room, under the cover of the night, Izuku and Megumin were cuddling. Unlike all other times, tonight something special had happened. They had taken a step forward in their relationship, elevating the tone of their love for each other. "Are you alright?" Izuku stammered, shyly looking down to look at the petite girl nuzzling against his chest, feeling well. His questions were rather incoherent, but he was still reeling from what they had done just minutes ago. Megumin mumbled, still a little shaky due to the intense experience they had just undergone. Still feeling slight tremors from each other, the young couple continued to cuddle, basking in the realization that their bond had deepened to such an extent. Megumin happily nuzzled into the chest of her amazing boyfriend, while Izuku held his beloved girlfriend quite fiercely, taking turns between caressing her hair and lovingly rubbing her back. It took a couple of minutes for the petite girl to finally summon the courage to look up and meet the eyes of her man. Both were blushing, but not shying away. "Can we?" Megumin hesitated for a second, her blush growing in intensity. "Can we do it, again?" It was Izuku's turn to turn a deeper shade of red. He couldn't help but nod. After tasting the taste of love, he found it impossible to deny such request from the girl he loved. Shyly, both teens moved to close the distance between their faces. Their lips connected, delicately at first, and then, slowly they began to press against each other, seeking more of the feeling of belonging to each other. Passion began to burn quite quickly, and then their tongues collided in a soft caress. The stimulus was too much to bear, and they stopped. Just like when they started. They had finally kissed, and the glorious moment would forever be engraved into their memories and hearts. The last step. It was early in the morning, but the staff of the guild hall were already scrambling around. The hero of Axel had been attacked last night by succubi. While the fact that such servants of the darkness were roaming in their city was scandalous enough, it was the news about Izuku being able to not only defeat them, but subdue them as well that was causing a ruckus. While most people believed the feat, no one could imagine how such a thing could be done. "All right, everybody!" Luna called those present to attention, knowing she had to act fast if she wanted to turn this situation around. "We need to set up an emergency quest to find out where these succubi came from. We have to show Izuku that he can rely on us, and show the churches how our town is not a den of heresy." Cheers erupted inside the building. However, it wasn't difficult to notice that the men were a lot less energetic than usual. Not that it was too surprising, considering that succubi were known for being extremely strong against males. Luna did expect the day to become ugly. The Inquisitors no doubt would arrive on the scene and bother her star adventurer to no end, so she needed to prepare the stage for him. Good meals at a discount, well-deserved praise, getting permission to post a fake quest to reward his achievement, all good methods to make him feel better. She could even gift him her bathhouse vouchers with a letter to allow him and his harem to share a private. Bam! The doors of the hall opened, revealing a furious archdruid, closely followed by an entourage of angry-looking girls, and one gator girl carrying 2 sacks from where the heads of 2 crying females were poking out. Luna quickly came to realize that this wasn't going to be just any ugly day. "Luna!" Izuku called over as he walked to the booth, leaving only Dread in the busty attendant. "I need to talk to you, in private. The denouncement I have to make is rather troublesome." Taking a look at the followers of the Archdruid, Luna couldn't help but notice the gator girl, particularly the way she was actually glaring at the 2 female heads that were poking out of the sacks. "Of course." Luna answered with as much professionalism as possible. "Please follow me." 5 minutes later, inside a private room, Luna found herself staring not only at the annoyed Archdruid, but his 2 crimson demon lovers and the 2 slaves that refused to let their master out of their sight. The gator girl seemed exceedingly violent this morning, and the guild attendant wasn't going to test how little patience she had left. Then, Izuku explained the situation surprisingly quickly. "Impossible," Luna despaired while holding her head in her hands. "I'm afraid that's the truth." Izuku lamented, Crossing his arms and giving a heavy sigh, I was also surprised by their confession. For someone who had been wronged so horrifyingly, Izuku had remained rather calm, if obviously annoyed. The oldest of the succubi had confessed that they had been summoned by someone from within the guild with the intention of getting private information on himself, namely his proclivities and possible gifts to offer him. It was rather tame compared to other possibilities, almost forgivable. And Izuku had no way to know how much of it wasn't true. Even if it wasn't that evil of an intention, it is still a crime. Megumin added, looking the most annoyed, not to mention the trouble we got ourselves into with the inn. Her dream had been fantastic, getting to know his world with metal carriages that didn't require magic or horses, giant towers made of steel and glass, getting to know his loving mother, and finally getting bold and sharing a bath, just for the dream to be interrupted when they were about to take off the towels. I understand. Luna immediately began to wave her hands in an apologetic gesture. The guild will pay for all the inconveniences. Glass was expensive, and very few buildings had it on their windows. Wiz was an expert at fixing them with magic though, so there had been little trouble whenever Chika accidentally shattered them. The innkeeper had been surprisingly understanding too. What had Izuku annoyed, though, was the idea of having to deal with an angry Liza. The gator girl had been way too close to killing her captives. Izuku really needed to find a way for her to control her strength, or rather, find the will to show some restraint. Can you see to that before the Inquisitors arrive? Yunyun shyly asked, as fun as it would be to start a fight with the church. Defeating and capturing succubi were feats said to belong to those both pious and devout. To hear that a group of heretics did so without any kind of effort would make the already tense situation explode. Their chunny tendencies made it hard to resist, but both Crimson Demons knew that their leader really didn't want to let his rage surface. To be honest, they'd rather not see Liza go all out. Blood and gore were actually pretty hard to remove from their clothes. Don't worry. Luna was quick to agree. She knew better than anyone else that dealing with Inquisitors was really bad for one's health. The guild will make sure to properly deal with this. Knowing the Eris Church, there would be a long investigation, and more than likely a purge inside the guild, but it would be much better than dealing with a case of widespread succubi prowling in the city. If she was lucky enough, and the culprit was caught fast, the only one to be cut down would be the summoner. No need to further bother the archdruid. Well, I wish you luck with that. Izuku finally said, handing over a piece of parchment with the information of the inn, and the amount requested for repairs. We'll take our leave now. Luna looked at the amount of money requested, and sighed in relief at seeing it was a rather modest sum. Small blessings. Chika is thankful this is over. Chika whispered in relief, her worries that this circus would extend until her beloved master snapped finally put to rest. Now we can all. Crash. Gah-hey. How did that happen? The noises and scream managed to enter the private room. Before Luna could do or ask anything, Izuku was already moving into action. Darkness and Ila were still there, keeping an eye on the succubi, so he feared that they had been hurt in an attempt to free the captives. Bam! Izuku opened the door with such force that it almost broke. What's going on here? One look at the scene told its own story. Ila was sitting on the floor, most likely the result of falling backwards. Darkness, however, was holding the adventurer dust against a wall. 2 sacks were laying on the floor, empty, and there were no succubi on sight. Why did you do that? Darkness shouted at her captive, who was showing tears of pain and fear. I don't know. Dust replied between sobs. Succubi excelled at illusions and seduction, while the men of Axel were largely known for their proclivities. That was why he left Darkness and Ila in charge of the captives, and yet, it seemed he underestimated the perverts. Ila, are you all right? Izuku asked with care, his soft expression denoting how he cared for the well-being of his teammates first and foremost. Yes. The ranger replied as she took an outstretched hand. He pushed me, that's all. It was mostly the surprise. I see. Izuku replied with a kind smile, happy to see that nothing bad really happened. Darkness, what happened? Taking a deep breath, the blonde crusader left Dust go. But not before fixing him with a death glare. These damnable she-devils must have used one of their seduction spells without us noticing. Darkness replied with a sigh. Some adventurers approached us with questions, and this man sneaked around with a knife to cut the bindings. Before we could react, the wenches flew off as fast as they could. Darkness' tone came off as full of hatred toward the succubi, which was understandable due to her religion. Izuku, however, didn't hold that much animosity toward the escapees. They did try to use their magic on his dream, true, but the intent hadn't been an act of evil, or even an attempt to feed off of him. It made him wonder if they were truly evil, or just victims like the demi-humans. But Izuku's voice earned the attention of his party members. You two are unharmed? The worry in the voice of the archdruid made the hearts of the girls skip a beat, all of them. He was such a caring man, thinking about their well-being rather than berating their failures. Or missing the vast bounty for the heads of the succubi. Yes. Ela replied, now standing and showing a tiny blush, I was just startled, as I said before. I'm fine. Darkness answered, successfully managing to contain her disappointment at not being assaulted during the escape. I wasn't even attacked. As Izuku sighed in relief, Chika and Liza looked at the whole scene. The Black Harpy, now attuned to the works of magic, knew that no spell had been cast. She also knew that Megumin and Yunyun were pretty much aware of that fact, if their glares were any indication. Liza, however, could tell that there were a lot of pheromones in the air, not feminine ones, just male. It was like most of the guys in the hall had been willingly lusting after the intruders she caught. While it wasn't their place to say anything, both had reached the conclusion that asking their master later would be for the best. Luna. Izuku called to the blonde attendant, sounding rather neutral in his tone, can I trust the guild to handle this problem? It was an odd question to be asked, to be honest. With everything at stake, any other adventurer would be able to make pretty much any demand and get away with it. Anything was better than dealing with the Inquisitors, even allowing said adventurer to do all sorts of evil things was better than to let the church burn down the town. Yes, of course. Luna was quick to answer, and eager to take the opportunity given to not deal with the church. I'll be sure to send you an appropriate compensation to your room tonight. Compensating the archdruid for this kindness was the least she could do. Of course, if said compensation was giving him her attention while wearing just one ribbon. No need. Izuku replied as he gathered his party, giving head pats to the demi-humans, and a quick kiss to Megumin's cheek, we won't be returning to the inn. It made sense, Luna supposed. After being assaulted by succubi there, no one would want to return. The innkeeper no doubt would experience a reduction in clientele thanks to the new reputation their establishment had gained. I see. Luna was quick to rethink her choices. She needed to make it clear that she, and the guild, were grateful, so, where will you be staying? Izuku gave out a sigh. Then Luna saw the rest of the humans in his party give smug grins her way. We won't be staying in town anymore. Izuku revealed, leaving a petrified attendant standing in disbelief, today we are leaving. Leaving? Luna knew very well that such a development was going to happen, but she still hoped it wouldn't happen so soon. Where are you going? When are you returning? Ha ha ha. Megumin laughter echoed through the hall as she posed extravagantly. We are going on a dangerous journey. We are departing this town of beginners to put an end to the eternal conflict. Immediately, Yunyun joined the pose, even though she looked a bit nervous. We'll march to the front lines, to the edge of danger. Yunyun continued, obviously enjoying the chance to demonstrate her heritage, but not as warriors, but like a fear storm. We are taking a training route. Izuku interrupted, knowing better than to allow them to fantasize about raining massive spells over potential battlefields. We'll be heading to the next big city to spend winter there, then we'll proceed to the other stops before heading into demon territory. Izuku informed the room while giving another once-over to Darkness and Ela. He really wanted to ensure they were unharmed. Luna had gone from startled to full-on panic. The best adventurer to ever grace the guild had just declared a suicide run. She couldn't allow it. Izuku, wait! Luna screamed as she reached to grab the archdruid's robe, that's too dangerous. Izuku stopped as he felt the tug on his clothes. Turning to look at the distressed attendant, he did notice honest concern. Pity the town lacked more honest people. The front lines are meant for the king's men and the chosen heroes. Luna tried her best to make her point, knowing very well that all the adventurers that had gone against the Devil King and his servants had died in horrible ways. The town needs you. We all need you. You make this place safe. Megumin and Yunyun grimaced. Their beloved leader was rather weak to damsels in need of saving, in need of protection. Luna had been always supportive towards them, and her demeanor toward Izuku was glaringly sweet. They could easily see him giving in, to accept a more permanent role in this side of the conflict, not that they minded. No. Izuku's response had been startlingly firm, much to the disbelief of his party members. The only reason I came to this land is to defeat the Devil King. The severity in the voice of the archdruid gave everyone in the guild pause. There was no proclamation of greatness, no demands for recognition and reward. As if such things were beneath the desires of his heart. It is true that I found people to love, to call family, in this town. Izuku revealed, regaling his girlfriend with a tender smile, but rather than setting my roots here, I intend to return home after my mission is over. With my newfound family. Megumin had to lower the brim of her hat to try to hide her massive blush and wavering smile. Her boyfriend could get overwhelming romantic at the most random of times. Yunyun, however, had her jaw dropping to the floor. This guy had just declared that he was going to steal her friend to a faraway land. Luna wanted to build an argument, to convince the young archdruid that this town of beginners could become his home. But the memory of all the times that this town of idiots had pushed him away, the hostility of the churches. With no fanfare or further words directed to the adventurers, or the guild staff, Izuku took his party and left the building. The hall quickly fell into a rather creepy silence. Everyone knew what kind of moment this was. The hero of Axel was leaving, for good, and no one had tried to stop him, or to join him in his heroic quest, not even offering words of encouragement. The people of Axel, the adventurers, were all beginners. Marching to the front lines was for veterans, people with talent and true strength. Everyone knew that no one was going to be of much help against the Devil King. And yet, Izuku the Archdruid had declared his intention. The adventurers were currently struggling to forget that Izuku was perhaps the most recent addition to the Adventurers Guild. They were trying really hard to convince themselves that the Verdinet had started powerful and wise, that his massive power was most likely a gift from his heritage, and not the result of hard work and research. They were trying truly hard to protect their lazy way of living, and were failing miserably to do so. Maybe we should. Dust started, his low voice still strong enough to be heard in the entire hall. Join him? Help him reach the front lines at least? Lin squeezed the hand of the blonde warrior, beaming with pride at the rare glint of bravery from the man she was dating. Keith and Taylor pondered really hard on the proposal, knowing very well that they had no special talent to offer, nor any special expertise or relic to help along the way. But their need to repay their life debt to the Archdruid was great, their pride as men and adventurers gnawing savagely against their need to avoid danger. Well, Keith began, obviously struggling to find some sort of speech to agree. Giving him a hand to reach the front lines would certainly increase his chances against the Devil King. And if he passes through Alconrisha, we may be able to make a long stop to get plenty of holy water. Alconrisha was the home of the Axis cult, and while the fanatics were annoying to deal with, the thermal waters and the cheap holy water were more than enough compensation for the bothersome cultists. And if he decides to reach the front lines through Monsbea, we can hit the local labyrinth for some rare items, Taylor quickly added, ensuring that whichever route the Archdruid chose would benefit them greatly. It is decided then, let's offer our services as an escort party. With a last cheer, the rather mediocre party left the building, making the rest of the adventurers feel even worse. Without anyone noticing, though, a certain silver-haired thief left the place too. Later, at Wiz's magic shop, Izuku looked at the shop where his undead friend resided. They hadn't been friends for too long, but Wiz was someone he considered a true friend. Reincarnating her was going to be a rather bombastic farewell, and he hoped that his departure didn't affect her too badly. Standing on his left side, the pair of crimson demons were locked in a heated discussion about the procedure to come, bickering about the possibility of changing the chant to increase the cool factor and how much of an impact such a thing would have in the quality of the spell. To his other side, Chica and Liza were talking about what they would like for a last meal in town before the start of their journey, or rather, Chica was doing all the talking, with Liza just standing there, seemingly waiting for him to move or order something. Darkness and Ela were absent though, both having to solve some last-minute family matters. Reincarnation was a very taxing spell, expensive too, but the young Archdruid thought it was worth it in the name of saving people, especially if they were friends. He would have to see to possibly recruiting an archpriest though, as he understood that using reincarnation was meant to be a last resort, or an emergency solution, not the go-to choice. He still shuddered at the image of the Linden mage crying in despair at changing races. Entering the shop, Izuku did his best to suppress various doubts and fears. Wiz had already declared that she didn't mind changing race, or even gender, if that meant being free of her burden. Wiz! Izuku happily called as he stepped into the eccentric shop, being closely followed by Yunyun and his girls. We are here for a special service. Yunyun had been exceedingly happy to find out that she was allowed to witness this miracle. Such occurrences were rare, as any spellcaster would religiously safeguard any secrets that granted them more power than usual. This was going to be her second time, and she still felt shivers about the chance to learn. "One moment please." Wiz replied from the back of the shop, the sounds of rattling and rustling being faintly heard. "I just finished your request." The group chuckled wholeheartedly, finding the antics of the shopkeeper charming. When she entered the room though, "I was curious as to the function of the clothes you requested, so I made some for me with the specifications." Wiz explained as she walked in, spinning and posing all the way. "This is so comfortable. My back feels so free." The ditzy shopkeeper had no outward change on her clothes as the same purple robe covered her like always, and yet she looked incredibly different. Where once her breasts were free to bounce wildly whenever she moved, now they were firmly standing as if on parade. They looked massive. I hope you don't mind. Wiz added as she began to place the requested clothes on the counter, completely failing to notice that Izuku had blushed and was now trying to look away. There was a great allure to watching breasts move freely, and yet, watching them standing firm had its charm too. These are for us? Yunyun shyly asked while taking a hold of one of the cloth pieces. It seemed to be appropriate for her chest size, and after analyzing it, she noticed that the shape was meant to increase comfort, while the metal piece below the breasts was meant for support. Is this some kind of charm that allows for increased growth? Megumin was quick to throw her question, taking a hold of one piece that was better suited for darkness or Liza. It was easy to imagine herself growing to fill it. Izuku's blueprints had included a diversity of models. Sport bras were closer to usable visible clothing, while also being adjustable for small breasts, so he requested them for Chika and Megumin. The piece of black cloth would no doubt look fine as part of Megumin's outfit, while it'd be easily covered by Chika's. The others were variants of the classical model, so the top-heavy girls would find relief in the support provided, although Yunyun would have to change her attire a little bit, lest the bra peek out from her outfit. No, no. Izuku replied, making an effort to not think on peeking bras and girls too innocent to know what that meant. This will help you while growing. It will give you frontal support so your back doesn't hurt, and your movement isn't impaired. While Izuku struggled to find words to properly explain things without sounding like a total pervert, his mind couldn't get over the fact that his petite girlfriend was indeed growing up. Now that she didn't deplete her mana every day casting explosion magic, and regularly ate full meals, her body had begun to grow. She had grown nearly half an inch, and her dress was beginning to show signs of becoming too short. Little bulges of flesh were starting to perk off from her chest too. Perhaps not even an A-cup yet, but if she managed to hit a growth spurt. Okay then. Megumin replied, failing to hide her smug grin, knowing that her boyfriend did indeed notice her as a woman. Here is your staff too. Wiz suddenly spoke, regaining their attention, making everyone aware of her anticipation. I upgraded it a little bit. The staff that was presented to the young archdruid had a new addition. The beak of the cockatrice had been shaped into a spear head, and attached to one end of the staff, turning it into a staff spear of sorts. Izuku finally had a functional melee weapon, even if it looked primal in nature. Taking the staff in his hands, Izuku could feel it fitting perfectly with his soul. Liza's protective nature in the scales covering the shaft, Chika's speed in the feathers adorning the top, and Wiz's faith in the care put into building it. Wiz! Izuku's voice calling for silence drew all of their attention to himself. Are you ready? The undead shopkeeper nodded, showing a rare glint of determination. She was ready for this, even if the spell failed, she had everything ready. Her demise would mark the beginning of the Devil King's fall, her reincarnation would mean her freedom, and either way her dear friend would be safe. Meanwhile, Chris followed Izuku and his party using Lurk, and by blessing her stats with her divine authority. She couldn't afford to mess things up again. She had come to terms with the fact that she had fucked up in their previous interaction. Loving to play the part of the prankster thief, she had forgotten that in most versions of Japan, taking things without explicit permission was considered a serious offense. She should have shown common courtesy before showing off her skills. The archdruid's love for the harpy, while misplaced, was also understandable. Without proper context, and a thorough history lesson, most otherworlders would see the treatment of the harpies as something tyrannical. She was certain that after showing him the truth, he would, at the least, be wary of the harpies. Even if he still coddled his harpy companion. Unfortunately, things had aligned to make possible interactions all the more difficult. As the goddess heiress, she found it infuriating how both churches alienated the young hero, prosecuted him even though he wasn't part of either group, and then had the audacity of excusing their misdeeds by invoking their greater standing. She had already sent prophetic dreams scolding them all, and demanding them to change their twisted ways. And still, she knew that her decision wasn't enough. Now perched on the roof of Wiz's magic shop, Chris was doing her best to infiltrate the locale and carefully watch what was going on. Wiz was a great source of entertainment and rare artifacts, but even she would think twice before fiddling with anything without the supervision of the ditzy shopkeeper. So, what are you doing here? Chris whispered to herself as she entered through one of the upper floor's windows. What kind of rarity are you trying to get before departing on your adventure? Looking through the cracks in the floor, the silver-haired thief managed to see the shopkeeper and Izuku's party. It didn't take long before she noticed that things were getting weird. Is that a sacrificial circle? The thief thought as she looked at all the stuff lined up inside that circle. Why would a druid need to do that? Why would anyone use that? Sacrificial circles were useless, an absolute waste of resources. Even the most desperate of wizards would only use one in the direst of circumstances. The floor was thick though, and the magic too dense for her to properly hear what was going on, so she could only wait and see. She could only hope to understand the young hero a little better, so she could convince him to accept her services. Magic began to flow inside the shop. It was a massive amount, and it resonated so beautifully that the thief couldn't help but be mesmerized. Is this his divine talent? Chris thought to herself as she failed to grasp why Izuku could cast spells on this level. Did he ask for the secrets of the arcane? Or perhaps the secrets of the nature of magic? Why does this feel familiar? Inside the shop floor? Reincarnation. Izuku finished his spell, and Wiz was enveloped in what appeared to be a cocoon of emerald light. For the ditzy shopkeeper, it felt warm and cozy, like being embraced by a loving parent. The scarce seconds it lasted were some of the best she had gone through in her existence. If the spell were to fail and she ended up dead, she would still be satisfied with the result. When the light receded, changes had become apparent. First and foremost, her ears had been elongated, becoming pointy and rigid. Second, she had become ever so slightly shorter, with a slender build that also affected her massive breasts. They were still big, but now in the same league as Yun, rather than the unreasonable size she used to have. It's over. Izuku breathed a sigh of relief as his friend had returned to life and retained her gender at the very least. I'm glad nothing too drastic. Ugh? Wiz's groan interrupted Izuku, giving him a severe case of panic attack. Seeing the ex-undead double over in apparent discomfort was starting to make him regret his actions. The thought of causing suffering to someone dear to him was unbearable. Wiz! Izuku shyly called, taking a step toward the aching shopkeeper, an action quickly mirrored by Megumin and Yun. Hey, are you okay? Yun asked with a stutter. Being able to see the super spell again had been a gift to her, but seeing a potential friend suffering was starting to affect her. Ah? Wiz shouted as she arched her back, and then, Ryup! Her robes nearly exploded, revealing a pair of beautiful white wings growing from her back. They were somewhat shorter than Chika's, and the feathers didn't match any type Izuku could recognize, but they were beautiful and part of her new body. The Emerald Archdruid was looking not at an elf, but at an Avariel. Eep! Izuku also noticed that, for some reason, Wiz had made her bra lacy. It was then that things began to cascade into a series of unusual events. Crack! Wham! From the ceiling, a silver-haired thief fell. Haphazardly landing, and pointing a shaky finger at the reincarnated shopkeeper, said thief began to sputter. The beloved! Chris incoherently began to shout, the dear on. Wham! Just to have Liza's tail fall upon her head, knocking her out instantly. For the Gator Girl, it was the most obvious thing to do. After all, the thief had been rather mean to Chika, so it stood to reason that she may hate any feathered friends. Since being mean to friends angered her beloved master, the reasonable thing to do was to remove such sources of anger. Hi there! Keel opened the door and entered the shop, closely followed by his wife. I know it's early, is this a bad moment? The ex-lich looked at the room for about half a second before things escalated yet again. Eek! Wiz shouted as she quickly covered her chest in a rather rare show of embarrassment. Ow! The necromancer yelped as his wife jumped to cover his eyes. Yun. Megumin called as she knew that she was the only one who could take command in this situation. Go get a spare robe. As the shy crimson demon darted into the back of the shop without even knowing where to search, the petite arch-wizard began use her large hat to provide some sort modesty to the panicking woman. She hadn't failed to notice that Wiz had not minded Izuku looking at her, something she would have to question later, after things calmed down. About an hour later? And that's the gist of it. Sasha finished her recount of what had happened to have them all reunited. In the background, a now-dressed Wiz was chasing a distressed black harpy, blabbering about how they were now feathered sisters, and that they should spend time caressing each other's wings. I can't believe all that happened so fast. Izuku was amazed at the information. Without being told of anything, things had developed on their own to set Keel and Sasha as the new owners of the magic shop, while Wiz had gone through all the paperwork required to leave her life behind to either start anew, or to pass away without regrets. It pained Izuku to think that his friend was preparing everything necessary for her burial. I know. Sasha replied, showing her own amazement. You'll think that someone that ditzy would also be messy with documentation. Now Liza was being used as a wall to help Chika get away from the crazed shopkeeper. The barbarian was showing rather dull eyes at the antics of the winged girls, seemingly unable to care about them, at least for the moment. She is still a messy person. Keel added as he emerged from the back of the shop, she may call this a shop, but the pieces here are more fit for a museum. Almost nothing is usable. Izuku could only give a nervous chuckle at the information. He had also noticed that oddity, but had been too nice to mention that to Wiz's face. I'm sure you'll manage. Izuku stated in good spirits. He was still worried about what Wiz was going to do now. Outside the shop? So? Yunyun asked to the now tied-up thief, too angry to show any of her shyness. That is one of the beloved. Chris continued to state, too far gone on whatever had her going. They were lost once, but now that she is here, they can return. For the goddess heiress, seeing her beloved children again, even if it was only one of them, filled her with hope. She even began to make plans to get her the perfect husband, a pure-blooded high elf that would give the best chances of continuing the Avarial race. With careful breeding, they could even become pure-blooded after just a few generations, and then she'd have her perfect children to dote on to her heart's content. Forget it. Megumin's words struck the thief deep, making her wonder why her idea of perpetuating her children's race was bad. She may have been reincarnated into one of the Avarial, but she is not some sort of prophet of heiress. If you want to take her to some sort of crazy zealots, then you'll find that we like to protect our friends. Yunyun nodded fiercely at that declaration, still pointing her wand toward the intruder. And if she wants to come to the heiress church? Chris asked, finally overcoming the shock of seeing an Avarial after so long. Don't you think she'll enjoy a better life under the care of? Bam! Kukui! Whatever else she was going to say, was interrupted by a horrifying screech that had everyone sans Yunyun flinching in pain. The black harpy and the reincarnated Avarial were now flying in circles around the group, with the first fleeing from the later. We are both the same. We shouted all too happily, arms outstretched in the hopes of catching the avian girl. Let me caress your feathers. I'll let you caress mine. Seeing the only Avarial in existence chase after a harpy in obvious love made Eris' blood boil. The last Avarial was choosing a harpy over her. She quickly swallowed her anger though. Flying into a rage wouldn't help her here. She had to be cunning and win over the heart of her beloved child no matter the cost, even if that meant having to form a party with a harpy. I don't think your goddess would allow her to play with harpies. Yunyun casually threw out her thoughts, giggling at how childish the shopkeeper looked while chasing the petite harpy. I also don't think Wiz will take it kindly if she sees how Eris treats her beloved harpies. That information gave Chris pause. How to cure the Avarial of her infatuation? Ready to go? Izuku asked as he exited the shop, closely being followed by the dark elf and the high elf. Wiz will be joining us by the way. What? Megumin and Yunyun shouted at the same time. One feared she'd get diminished attention, while the other had to add another obstacle in her goal of getting more attention. I'll join your party too. Chris also shouted, eyes full of determination. The first step to win her child's heart was to spend as much time as possible with her, and for that, she needed to be in the same party. You need my expertise. No, I don't. Izuku was getting annoyed. He had to leave town before dusk if he wanted to reach the next large town with time to spare before winter, so he couldn't afford to entertain zealots today. Why don't you take your expertise somewhere else? I'll let you know that I am the VE. Whatever Chris tried to say was interrupted by a zealous albino gator girl. Master, says. Liza calmly repeated as her massive clawed hand enveloped the head of the now panicking thief, somewhere else. And with that said, Chris was launched roughly in the direction of the Adventurers Guild. She also joined the scarcely few that could boast about surviving an encounter with a gator demi-human, even if she was aided by her godly endurance, rather than skill or luck. Do you think she'll be alright? Izuku asked, slightly worried that his wording may have ended up killing someone. Do you want her to be alright? Megumin asked, knowing that the thief would only keep causing trouble if left alone and alive. Rather than answering, Izuku decided that now was the best time to leave. He was getting behind schedule now, and still had to modify the seating arrangement now that Wiz was joining the party, even if only until she decided where to start anew. Later, at the gates of Axel. Darkness and Ela were still missing, but Izuku had faith in them. Seeing the carriage before him filled him with an odd sense of accomplishment though. The dwarves he had commissioned to construct it had done a superb job. The main body was made of thick insulated wood, reinforced with a frame of high-quality steel. Runes carved throughout the frame ensured that it would resist all but the most top-tier monsters that included dragons, and the special treated wood would not burn short of being thrown into an active volcano. The interior was cushioned for maximum comfort, and a set of enchanted stones helped to regulate the temperature to some extent. The wheels were quite the sight to behold too. Rather than the usual beam-supported wheel, or a plain thick wooden disc, it was made with round steel plates, thick enough to offer a lot of ground contact, which helped to distribute the weight. They were also covered with Izuku's vines, which worked like tires from his own world. To top it all off, the dwarves had used his blueprints for a suspension system, ensuring a much more pleasant voyage for everyone. There seemed to be a problem though. Who, or what is going to move this? Megumin began to ask, failing to contain her curiosity. Monstrosity of a fortress? Yunyun finished the question, equal parts amazed by the design, and baffled at the fatal flaw of the same. Before Izuku could answer, Liza walked to the vehicle, and began to move it back and forth a few centimeters, showing just a little bit of effort. Then she beamed at her master, expecting to be appointed to the job of moving such a thing, to show how useful she could be. Both Crimson Demons couldn't help but to take a step back at the show of monstrous power. No need to worry about that, we are going to use this. Izuku waved off the concerns as he pulled out a small pouch. Chika, come here. Izuku called for the avian girl, who instantly glided to his side, avoiding the still chasing Wiz. Liza knew that her master required the full attention of the little trickster, so, with agility and speed she had no right to possess, captured the Avarial. Wiz didn't seem bothered by being held like a kitten by someone that strong, instead still flailing her arms in a futile attempt to catch up to Chika. Master? Chika shyly whispered, no longer expecting a scolding, but desiring some sweet words. Remember your egg? Izuku's question received a nod from the avian girl. I asked Wiz to turn it into this, the strongest fertilizer known to man. Chika gave a cute odd sound. She may not have understood all the words, but she had understood that her egg had been very useful to her beloved master. Now we are going to use it to create a new friend. Izuku added as he introduced a good berry into the pouch, a very strong friend for our new mobile home. As Izuku placed the pouch on the ground, he reflected on the skill he had purchased recently. It had cost a lot, but the description had been enticing enough for him to be unable to resist it. Activating both plant growth and plant manipulation, Izuku directed the good berry to germinate and grow into a shaped plant. Before the astonished Crimson Demons, a new plant creature was being created. Thorny vines expanded, twisted, and knotted to form a body. It was like an ox, but massive, easily 2 meters tall. The hooves were massive, the tail ended in a spiked ball, and the horns were closer to those of a moose. The plant looked like a green bull with exposed sinew, or rather, behemoth. Yunyun spoke without thinking, closely followed by a gulping Megumin. Both saw this as another creature of myth being born before their eyes. Now comes the real work. Izuku stated as he strengthened the grip on his staff, ready to cast his new spell. I call to you, woodland spirit, humble being standing before me. Izuku intoned, failing to notice the entire forest outside Axel standing to attention at his voice. Listen to my will as I guide you to a higher calling, a greater destiny. The bowl made of vines began to glow, resonating beautifully with Izuku's mana. Unbound and unshackled, join me in my journey while learning what it means to live. Unknown to the arch-wizards, Izuku had yet again changed the chant, eliminating the mentions of forced servitude. Because life has form, form has life. Awakening. When the spell finished, the bowl came to life. It made no verbal sound, but the steps it took toward Izuku made the ground tremble a little bit. Friend? Izuku asked as he extended his open hand towards the incoming creature. The massive ox-like creature happily nuzzled against said outstretched hand. Master. Chika was way too happy with the sight of the new friend made with her egg. New friend is like a baby. Megumin flinched at the comparison, not failing to understand the undertone used by the harpy. As Izuku began to attach the newly created creature to the carriage, Izuku failed to sense a few dark clouds approaching. His journey was about to start, but it wouldn't be without complications. Omake, a man's struggle. Kyuya Mitsurugi, otherworlder chosen by the goddess, and self-proclaimed hero, was returning from his work in the mines. It was not glamorous, and poorly paid, but with the mark on his adventurer card, he was forbidden to take even gathering requests. Just a little bit more. Kyuya bemoaned as he approached the third rate inn he was booked in, the thought of his lady goddess welcoming him being the fuel powering his muscles. One more week of this nonsense and we'll be able to afford that ticket to Alcanrisha. It was bullshit, really. While true that they had fucked up Keel's dungeon, it hadn't been that big of a mess up, especially if the rumors were true, and the druid fixed everything without help. Most likely the undead being weakened as a result of his beloved Aqua's divine seal. The charges of endangering an entire town should be null and void, but the king had decided otherwise, and he couldn't do anything else about it. Why did she denounce me like that? Kyuya made a short stop to ponder on the other charges. What they did to their ranger companion, or rather, ex-companion, was seen as a most despicable act. Even if the procedure was not illegal, leaving someone else with your debts was seen as an act of betrayal. Worse still was the additional shame of finding out that the girl had been able to pay the entire debt herself in a rather short amount of time, making him look as a truly unreliable party member. I don't deserve any of this. Kyuya bemoaned as he entered the inn. Hey, pretty boy. The innkeeper, a rather fat and big woman who looked as if she had some orc ancestry, called over the counter, don't you dare to be late for payment. You know what I'll do to you if you don't pay on time, right? The rather feral grin on the woman gave Kyuya the shivers. "I'll pay tomorrow, just like everyone else." Kyuya's reply was colored by fear. He really didn't want to spend an entire day, entertaining, this woman and her friends to pay for the room. The last flight of stairs was both dreadful and comforting, signaling the end of the day, and marking the beginning of more headaches. Aqua didn't like to make sacrifices or compromises. She wanted her liquor, and she wanted her pampering. Kyuya quickly had to learn that for such a refined palate, his lady goddess was unable to recognize her favorite fruity wine from the cheap moonshine sold by seedy bars. He also had to learn that the single bed in their room was never going to welcome him, as his lady goddess really didn't want to share it. "I'm home," Kyuya nearly sang as he entered the tiny room. While he stopped expecting the traditional greeting long ago, he had come to expect some kind of rebuttal or complaint from his beloved goddess upon entering the room. Instead, there was a rather uneasy silence, and a suspiciously calm-looking goddess sitting in the bed, looking away, and shielding a rolled piece of cloth. "Lady Goddess?" Kyuya's eyebrow began to twitch. "You are not hiding anything, right?" He knew he was to blame. He had promised abundance of the best of everything, and he hadn't been able to deliver. However, he expected certain level of understanding, like understanding the fact that they needed to save money to reach Alconrisha. "I don't know what you are talking about." Aqua's poor denial was more than enough. It didn't take a lot of effort to wrestle the bundled cloth away from the archpriestess, much less to find out that the girl had somehow found a way to use their savings to buy more liquor, again. "Lady Goddess." Kyuya was falling in despair. "This would need another week of work and eating just half as usual. I was going to use that money to pay the rent." "Didn't she give you an option to pay without money?" Aqua replied with a pout. Kyuya quickly began to reconsider the option of returning to Axel. Maybe then he could find a way to lift the marks on his card, and recruit the ranger, who no doubt would be more useful than the thief that ran away with half of their money. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. Support the writer. Don't forget to like, sub and share.